Monday, February 6th, for a regularly scheduled town council meeting. All the members of the council are present, including the town manager, town clerk, town attorney. If you could please remember to silence your phone for us, that would be much appreciated. If you will stand for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us embrace each new day in every transition and change. As we enter into each new era with excitement and even some anxiety, let us recall compassion, presence, and abounding love. Let us be thankful for the experiences that have brought us to this day and for the work of others that gives breadth and depth to our own work. Amen.
Next, we have the approval of the final agenda. Is there a motion to approve the final agenda?
Mayor, I would like to pull A from the consent agenda, and if we could discuss that sometime after the presentation.
Okay, so you want to pull A and pull it down after the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Any objection to that? John, do I need a motion to do that?
Yes, sir.
Is a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Any other changes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the final agenda as amended?
So moved.
I'll second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Next, we have public comment. Madam Clerk?
Up first is Wendy Herron. After Wendy will be Carolyn Caney.
Good morning. My name is Wendy Herron. You just heard that. I have a property mid-island on Sable Drive, which I have lived at for 16 years, my parents before me, and I am a full-time resident. We need to find a solution to all the tourists or snowbirds who are driving up and down the residential streets, hanging out of their car windows, taking pictures of FMB's devastation. Not only is this hurtful to those of us trying to recover, making us feel like zoo animals, it is also disruptive to our recovery by tying up traffic and impeding contractors, suppliers making deliveries, and workers trying to get to their jobs on the island. Saturday, one of my neighbors stood in the street sobbing as she watched her home being demolished and had to put up with cars trying to get past the contractors to sightsee the damage. This is outrageous and unconscionable to those of us still suffering from the impact of Ian. I would like to be able to erect a sign at the end of our street that states, "Stop, residents only, no turnaround." I realize that our town is under severe monetary constraints at this time, so I do not expect payment to come from them for this. I'm hoping that this is acceptable and that I don't need a permit. However, if we do, I know my neighbors would help cover the cost for this, and I would cover the cost of the sign. I'd like to close by saying I'm very glad for all the businesses which are slowly recovering and grateful for all of those who frequent them. I love all the little food trucks that have popped up and the variety of tastes that they offer and how they're filling in until our local restaurants get back on their feet. Bravo to these intrepid entrepreneurs, and thanks to everyone toiling to make our little island whole again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy.
Carolyn, do you want to speak now or during the public comment of the hearing? Okay. David Bauer, same to you. Do you want to speak now or during the public hearing for the item? Okay. David Bauer. Up after David would be Tahita Mateen.
Hi guys, I'm David Bauer. I live over by Beach Access 15, full-time resident. Spent the last 7 years roughly rebuilding the home, bringing it up to code, doing just about anything I could think of to shore up the house and make it better. Pulled permits for everything. During that process, we applied for a permit to rebuild our front deck. And we were told at the time that even if we plank, we have to move the front porch. Well, the front porch has been there for 50 years. In so doing, the city made us pull the whole front porch back 6 inches. Well, the 6 inches didn't help anybody. It didn't raise anybody's view. It didn't make anything better for anybody, but it cost us $20,000. So in that same permit, we wanted to raise our air conditioner unit, leave it in the same location, and raise our air conditioner up to code. That was the last of the things we needed to do to make our house whole. They didn't allow us to do that. They said if we touched the air conditioner, we had to move it to another side of the house. Well, I'm on a corner lot with a canal. So I'm 25, 25, 25, and now 10, I think, is the new side setback. I'm currently at 8. So as a result of not allowing us to raise our air conditioner, that cost us another $7,000 because it went underwater. So everything in our home survived, except for the air conditioner. So all our choices were good. I'm asking that we stop, take a look at realities with these setbacks, porches. How long's the house been there? And not just jump onto a piece of paper and say, oh, you have to do this, or else. We should be able to repair something that already exists, even if it is encroaching on a grandfathered setback. That a repair does not implicate that owner to bring that section up to a new setback. It just doesn't make sense. We're faced, and you guys are doing a great job. Oh my God, I can't imagine the stress that you guys are under these current situations. But we're faced with making this city something amazing again. And we have to use some common sense on some of this. Some of these homes that have been here for 50, 60 years that no longer conform on a lot, they should be able to go back to their same original footprint. There's houses on the beach that their lots are way too small. If you start doing anything in a setback, it's a big problem. We need to use common sense in this, and we can no longer keep forcing a homeowner to do things that just don't make sense. It's costly. One last thing, the canals are in deep trouble, as we all know. I was a licensed dredging contractor for years. We need to start some kind of dredging program. We need to start this right away, get the permit going, get the Army Corps involved. I figure that we've lost about a foot of navigation.
David, I need you to wrap it up. You've
okay.
had your 3 minutes.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, David.
Tahita Mateen.
Hi, good morning. Good to see you all again. Just a couple updates from the SBA. Oh, Tahita Mateen, United States Small Business Administration, and temporarily deployed here. So we didn't receive, the state did not receive an extension for Hurricane Ian, but SBA is still working on a grace period, which means for those people who have had physical damages, you are still able to submit an application for physical damages, homeowners, renters, business owners, nonprofit organizations. The only thing that they have to do is submit a justification as to why they missed the deadline. So that's going to be an automatic pop-up. Even if they do the application online, it's going to be a pop-up window to say, why did you miss the deadline? You know, you have to submit it in writing. That will then go to the Processing and Disbursement Center, and they will make a judgment on if that excuse is accepted or not. So just don't take yourself out of the qualifications before you apply. The DRCs are still open in Lee County. If you have a denial, you're in reconsideration, you have a withdrawal, please go in there and get your questions answered. You have 6 months to reconsider if there was a homeowner or a renter or a business owner that was denied. You have 60 days for those people that were approved and you're not sure if you're going to take those funds or not. You have 60 days to say yes or no. If it goes a little bit beyond just keeping good communication for us, there are some people waiting on their distribution. We have made some urgent requests to the Processing and Disbursement Center for those people who have returned everything, but they're still waiting. In other cases, we're still waiting for people to sign their loan and security agreement. Have a certificate of flood insurance. They're trying to wait and get their partners to sign the loan and security agreement, so they're chasing them down. So in some cases, we're waiting on that, but some cases, the people have returned everything, and those are the urgent cases that we're looking into. It is moving along, and I'll get an update with that soon. The working, paying special attention to those business owners. If you had physical damage, you can still apply. And for those working capital needs that business owners need, you have until June 29th. So we've been working with the chambers in the area and in Lee County just to make sure that we're identifying those business owners that they know about. And of course, the business owners that we know about that have applied to make sure that we can, help them through the process. So that is all that I have. Me and my partner, we will hang around for a little bit just in case there are any questions from your constituents. And that is all that I have from the SBA update. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Tahita.
Thank you.
Richard Durling, do you wish to speak now or during the public hearing? Richard Durling.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, Town Council. I'm Richard Durling with Marvin. I'm here today to speak on behalf of one of the owners,
If you could, yeah, thank you.
one of the property owners here in Beach at 434 Boulevard. The owner is Sarah Tarble, and her property is one of those lots that's up on the north end that's only a 50 by 60 foot wide lot. The direction that we're getting from the city is that we possibly can build back, because her house was completely, okay. Thank you. House was completely destroyed, so there's nothing left. But the direction we're getting is that she can replace like for that structure. That structure was a 26 by 26 foot structure roughly, so less than 700 square feet. She would like us to build a two-story home over parking at, of course, the current FEMA elevation requirements and the current building codes. The direction, again, is that we can build like for like, which would be one story over parking. For those of you who don't know of Marvin Homes or our company, we build a home that's out in Cape Harbor, which are called the Funky Fish Houses, and I'll show you a picture of these. Give that to you. These houses are actually up to 4 stories in height, so they would exceed that 2-story request that we're making. But the feeling is that we'd like to be allowed some ability to build these taller structures, considering the value of these properties and the investment that these owners are going to make to rebuild their homes. There's 12 lots in this neighborhood, 3 rows of 4 houses that run from Estero Boulevard to the beach. Currently, only partially one is left, so there's 12 houses to be rebuilt in that area. I would point out that there are neighboring properties that exceed those elevations, so it would be in conformity with the ones that are around it. But here again, with these owners trying to recover and build something that is attributed to the value of those properties and giving them the flexibility of having something that's a little bit more livable than 700 square feet, that they would like to have this opportunity for you all instead of going through the variance process to address this up front so that it makes the recovery a little bit easier for all of us. So again, if you would take that into consideration, that those properties that are that small, we're proposing that we build within the same footprint, and with these little Funky Fish Houses in Cape Harbor, very small footprints, but we're allowed to go the 2 floors. So again, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Richard.
Jesse Field.
Good morning, everyone. I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to speak. The reason why I'm going to talk to all of you today is I'd like to be considered to be on the Bay Oaks Advisory Board. I'm a beach parent, so I have a vested interest in this board. My kids use Bay Oaks quite a bit. It's fantastic. They've made a lot of friends. They do the swim club, after school programs. They do all the camps. It's quite wonderful getting to know all the people that are involved. They're really dedicated to what they do every single day. I myself actually use the gym probably 3 or 4 times a week prior to Ian. I'm a firm believer that that facility is extremely important, that's for sure, and I think it could be even better than what it was prior, which is saying a lot. So I would like to be considered on the advisory board and really appreciate your consideration, and I'm looking forward to what Bay Oaks is going to be. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse.
Madeline Boyd. You wanted to talk about the sidewalk cleanup.
Madeline Boyd, 21054 St. Peter's Drive, and co-owner of the Beach Bar. I've been coming every week to complain about the sidewalks. I just wanted to say kudos. They look so much better. It was so much safer walking here today. Sorry I couldn't participate, but I was painting till my company came at noon. But thank you, Jim, for spearheading that.
Thank you, Madeline.
That's all I have signed up.
Is there anyone else that would like to talk during public comment? Yep, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I came in from the south end.
Can you identify yourself, please?
My name is Dawn Godsoul. I'm the Director of Sales and Design for Marvin Homes. I'm actually here also, as Richard Durling was, representing our customer, Sarah Tarble, who I've been working with for the past few months and hopefully coming up with a way to rebuild her cottage, her beloved cottage, which was swept away. She wrote a letter, so I'd like to read the letter to you on her behalf. Dear Town Council, in 2017, we purchased 434 Estero Boulevard. It was a rundown mess. It was a dream for us to own on the north end of Fort Myers Beach because of all the residential homes. We hired licensed contractors and applied for the required permits. We were asked if we were going to build up at that time, and we told them no, but it was presented to us as an option. A year later, we were able to enjoy our home. Fast forward to Hurricane Ian. Our home was completely swept away. We were questioned as if we were to sell our lot. Our answer was no. We wanted to rebuild to keep the integrity of the north end, hoping that the others in our same situation would want to rebuild as well. The home we had was never big enough for our family. Neighbors all around us raised their homes, and they were building 2 and 3 stories before the hurricane. We decided that since we had to rebuild, we'd like to build a 2-story home in the same footprint of our original cottage, similar to our neighbors. Our lot is small, but we found a home builder that could do exactly what we were asking, rebuild on our lot with 2 stories. Our hope is that the surrounding neighbors who had their homes swept away would see what we were building and replace their homes with the same type of home that we were going to build. 2-story, hurricane-proof homes on the legal non-conforming lots. Our fear is that if we cannot build what we would like, many, including us, would sell collectively multiple lots to condominium companies, and we lose the neighborhood to corporations. We are trying to build within our means. If we build a 1-story, it will not fit our needs, and it will likely exceed our budget for just 800 square feet. On the other hand, if we can build upwards without investing a lot more money, we will have created a nice home and contributed to rebuilding what Fort Myers Beach is known for, single-family vacation homes and eventually a retirement home. We are appealing to the zoning and permitting boards to take a look at the north end. Many neighbors' homes are now 2 stories, having been rebuilt in recent years. We'd like to show discouraged landowners that we can rebuild something very livable and desirable in our same footprint without going out, but going up, and we want our neighbors to do the same. We can be the beacon of hope that helps restore Fort Myers Beach back to its original glory, but we need the city's help. Sincerely yours, Sarah Tarble. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thanks, Don. Anyone else? Tom?
Morning, everyone. Tom Torgerson, 301 Palermo Circle. Just briefly to talk about beach nourishment and beach emergency dune projects. First, the emergency dune project, which is right in front of us. Origins, I'm sure it has something to do with Hurricane Ian. So that in itself suggests that it's come about in a relatively short period of time. The residents have been distracted, to say the least, and really haven't gotten our heads into this till now, that it's being circulated that we have these easements to sign. So getting our heads into it, we're here today, and I have some concerns with what's being proposed as is. I want to go on record that I'm really supportive of both projects, both the renourishment project and the emergency FEMA dune project. My concern is all surrounding vegetation, and I know there's 3 options that the town staff generated and have been approved by FEMA. They're custom design plans. 1, 2, 3. 1 is considered low profile. I studied that plan, and I don't conclude that it's low profile. So I started doing my own research, and there is vegetation that is low profile called the railroad vine, which is extremely hardy in this environment, this exact geographic location, and sand and dry conditions and salt conditions, approved by FEMA. Now, that only grows to a height of 4 inches to 6 inches maximum. In the low profile as is, there's plant material in there that grows over 3 feet, 3 to 4 feet, and that's the low profile option. So I'm putting before you today, I think I speak for a huge contingent out there that would like to support these projects, but is concerned about the vegetation options that are on the table, and would like a true lower profile vegetation option of primarily the railroad vine plant material. The other aspect to consider in this is views to the beach, and the higher profile plant obstructs views, not just residents and business owners and their guests, but those that use the beach. It's a view obstruction. But the other thing it does is, and I use this term being born and raised in Minnesota, it acts as a snow fence. And it just magnifies the speed of which the originally intended dune height was created as. It causes it to grow exponentially faster. And I understand that there's maintenance options to go out there and rake your sand away from your dune and somehow get it into a front end loader down on the beach and get it off island. But I question really how practical that is, and the lower profile material doesn't do the snow fence effect to the extreme level. So. But it is entirely erosion, highly rated as erosion control and to protect the dune. Deep-rooted, the nodes all over the place that go deep root and protect the dune. It's a full mat coverage. It's not
Tom,
sparse.
I need you to wrap it up.
Oh, did I hear
the time went off? Yeah.
That's it. It's not too late to get a true 4th and maybe 5th option. We could go in there with all railroad vines as one option, and some with maybe 80-90% railroad vines with a little bit of daisy, and maybe on the ends a little bit of sea oat sprinkled in there. My gut says they're going to at least accept one of the 2, if not both of those options, and I think it's not too late. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else choose? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Nir Cohen.
Can you repeat again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
My name is Niri Cohen. I'm the H2O owner of the stores. I've been struggling for 4 months to get electric with between the city and the FPL. So I'm asking you guys to help us out. We're in the Times Square. Every time I try to talk with FPL, they told me that, yeah, we're coming, and now it's fall into the town the last time I talked to them. So I went to the town, talked to them, and it's very hard for me to operate it with no electric. I have people work for me with no electric, and it's dangerous, so we have to close early. So I'm asking the town if they can help us to expedite so we can get the electric back. I already follow all the inspection and did all things the right things. So I'm getting electric inspection today, and that's the final. But I do like to have electric. It's hard for me to work without no electric. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm Dan Dodrell with Daniel Wayne Homes, and I'm representing the owner at 720 Matanzas Court. They're on one of the small lots. She's getting pushed both ways because it's a corner lot, which I believe you guys are going to address in your setback ordinance. So she's getting double setbacks because it's a corner lot. It's a small lot. But then if she's being told if she does rebuild, she can only rebuild the about 800 square foot cottage. And she purchased that property for a lot of money just a couple years ago. We are also building the new house that was under construction before the storm at 441 Estero Boulevard, which is right across the street from the previous folks that were speaking with Marvin Development. That's on a 45-foot wide lot. We met the 7.5-foot setbacks. We kept our mechanicals out of the 7.5-foot setback, and it's 2 floors of living over parking, and I'm having a hard time explaining to the other people why we can do it there. I know it's a little deeper lot, it's on the bay, but still, 45-foot wide lot, 7.5-foot setbacks, we're 25 feet off Estero, does have a bigger backyard, but it's 2 floors of living over top of parking. It's built to the code. Third example is 327 Estero Boulevard. We had that finished before the storm. The owners rode the storm out. You can go down and look at the house. It survived great. The code works. The FEMA elevations work. We just got to be allowed to rebuild what can work for the island and keep the charm of those little communities, like was mentioned, little 12, 14 lot communities, as single family, instead of forcing the owners to say, well, you can only build back 700 square foot. It's not feasible. Well, it's feasible, but it's not financially feasible, and they end up selling to somebody and put a high-rise resort that wouldn't exactly keep with the character of the island. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Hi, good morning. My name's Chris Rayburn, and my wife and I own a home at 3720 Estero Boulevard. I'm a third-generation family of property owners on the beach going back to Hurricane Donna. And I just want to, first I want to note that the staff has been fabulous, that throughout all of this, every time we've had a question, we've come to City Hall, and Donna and who? Aaron have been just great. So I just think it's important that hopefully you guys note that, because I know it's stressful for everybody, and we've gone many times, and every single time they've been responsive. But the main reason I also want to speak is on the beach renourishment project. We're very much in support of it, but just real quickly, we do have some problems with the easement the way it's written now. And so I have written Chad my concerns. I don't need to go through all of them here, but I just hope it's not too late to have people look at the easement. It seems ambiguous in terms of like public access onto dunes that we think is on our private property. And there's some liability issues that we have some concerns with. So hopefully it's not too late to take a look at that, and Keith can pass that around, because I know Chad shared it. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. There's someone over here that, yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Charles Drake. I live at 117 Falkirk. And my reason for getting up and speaking today is more of a back up and keep things in perspective comment. This last summer I went to Mexico Beach, and it's 4 years since the hurricane hit. And I would say there's a lot, and I mean a lot of vacant lots that are just sitting there dead. And as we sit here as a community that has to deal with the dollars and cents of running a town like this, it seems that it would be in our best interest for everybody concerned to work towards rebuilding and building the tax base so that people aren't taxed out, for one, and that the people that are here that are looking at a very, very murky building code don't just say, you know what, I got an offer on the table, I'm out of here. You know, these are the people that love Fort Myers Beach, like myself, and would like to stay, and they would like to know kind of how that's possible. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Anyone else care to speak? Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Next, we got local achievements and recognitions. Vice Mayor Adderholt.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everybody. I'll be very brief. Appreciated the comment earlier. I was walking to the town council meeting this morning from the property that we're renting temporarily until our place is fixed, and I just wanted to thank everybody that came out on Sunday to help make those sidewalks immaculate. I mean, quite honestly, it's a game changer for the town. It seems like a trivial thing to some, but for many who walk along those sidewalks, it's the key artery through our community, or try to ride your bike, particularly with the big trucks on the road. You often want to get on the sidewalk with your bike. It really is a game changer. So thanks to Beach Talk Radio and just the litany of volunteers up and down the 7 Mile Island who really transformed Estero Boulevard in a way that really it's difficult to describe from a practical standpoint, but I think it was also from an encouragement and an emotional uplift to our citizenry. I just wanted to thank everybody involved. It really was a game changer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Veach.
Well, not to repeat what Vice Mayor Adderholt said, I was out on that day too, quite a turnout. But I would also just obscurely, I was down on Hibiscus Drive, which is an area that is lost probably 6 houses deep from Estero back. They have a lot of RVs there, and when I was down there at the end of the street, they have a little cul-de-sac, and there were some people replanting it. And that they're just neighbors who are trying to beautify their street and try to bring back a little bit of that Florida green. That impressed me.
Councilor Woodson.
I was going to comment on the cleanup as well, but I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, the commitment to this island by our residents, by other people who visit the island, has just been amazing for me. Listening to the public comment, there is a lot of want and need for rebuilding, and I personally think that as we move forward, we really need to look at that, and I know we are, and things take time, and I know everyone's not very patient, and I'm the least of the patient people. But just know that we are looking into all of these things, and we will keep looking into them, and appreciate so much all of you coming out and talking. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor King?
I'll pass after looking at the agenda today. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to take what Councilor Veach and Vice Mayor Adderholt said a little bit further. It wasn't just the sidewalks that were getting cleaned up. There was also a joint beach cleanup at the same time. And I talked with the owners of Tuna Skin afterwards, and they said it was probably one of the largest cleanups they've had. Thank you to the Weber family for helping take and get rid of that garbage. Also, the contractors that came down, there were several, myself included. Ironically, Vice Mayor and I ended up at the same place, and I brought my little stand-up skid steer down there, and we were moving piles to one bigger pile, and a contractor on the island showed up with one of these massive front-end loaders to help scoop up piles and make it easier for the town to get rid of. So thank you to them. Thank you to the people that came out, and I'm sure they're feeling a little bit of pain today from the shoveling and the brooming, but a little exercise never hurt anybody. So thank you. Next, we've got advisory committee items, reports, and appointments. The first one is the Anchorage Advisory Committee. It's my understanding that there's the exact amount of people for that. Is there a motion to approve the candidates that applied for the Anchorage Advisory Committee?
So moved.
I'll second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries unanimously. Next, we have the Audit Committee. Same thing, the same number of applicants as opened, so I'll entertain a motion for those that applied for that.
So moved.
And I'll second.
Tie.
All those in
Second.
favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Next is the Bay Oaks Campus and Advisory Board, BORCAB. There are 4 seats open, and there are 5 candidates. So we need to fill out your 5 and sign it and give it to the clerk. Is that correct? And then do you want to do these, go through, and then we'll read the results after? Okay. Is there 6? Oh, there's 6 there. So you got to choose 4 of the 6. Everyone got their 4?
Not quite yet.
Not yet? All right, the next one is the Cultural and Environmental Learning Center Advisory Board, CELCAB. There are 5 candidates and 4 open spots, so select who you'd like the 4 spots to be.
Now, just for Amy, you put a note on this that one of the people, I think, is not a resident?
Correct. There's one of them probably is not a resident. And then in the case of like Betty Simpson or someone that's on another committee, you'll need to give them the waiver that they can be on more than one committee.
Should we do that if Betty is voted in, is appointed, then we have to do the waiver?
Yes. Okay. Do you want to tell us which one? We don't have it in front of us. Who the one is that is not a resident?
There were 2. I think that, did I put Carrie and Allison? Or
you don't
neither
have
one of them are residents?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that they're in the zip code,
Yeah.
but not on the island.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the second one. Oh. Everyone got their choices on that one? The next one is the Marine Environmental Resources Task Force. Same thing here. There's the same number of people have applied for the open positions. Is there a motion to approve those that applied to be on the MRF?
So moved.
I'll second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Next is the Public Safety Committee. There are 3 open positions and 4 candidates. So go ahead and make your selections on those.
And this one, again, I think there's a couple of off-island people.
I believe so. Counting. Going above and beyond. Amy, do you need a little time to tally those? We can go and do the approval and come back? Okay. Next will be the approval of minutes, the Town Council January 9th meeting, Management and Planning session from January 12th, and the Town Council meeting of January 23rd. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? I'll approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Not to put you under the gun, but we're going to go back to you, Madam Clerk. No, you're not ready yet? John, can we go ahead with the presentation and then come back to allow her some time?
Probably might be more efficient to bypass presentations and go to the consent agenda. Just a thought while she.
If you say that's what we can do, we will go on to the consent agenda. Agenda item A has been pulled and moved up to be discussed after the presentation. Is there a motion to approve B and C of the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
And I just have a question, a procedural question. Just for the public's benefit, could Chad or Mike come up and just explain, or maybe the attorney, what B is, and how it relates to A, or if it relates to A, because I think there's certainly the same subject matter. I'm losing my mic here.
The item B on the consent agenda is separate and distinct from the emergency beach berm project, which is going to be discussed in presentations in item A. The item 10B is actually the continuation of the beach renourishment project that's been on and off this council's agenda for over a year, much prior to Hurricane Ian. It just brought more urgency to it as a result of the impacts of Hurricane Ian.
And John, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Could you then just, or someone just explain exactly what B is, just for the public's benefit?
Then I would suggest that we pull item B. Technically, that would be the appropriate process, and there would be a discussion of B, A and B, and you would just vote on C. Any item that's involves discussion or other than just a straight vote needs to be pulled.
Yeah, I'm not interested in discussion, just a description of what it is. But if you would prefer to have it pulled, I think it's so joined with A, even though they're separate separate issues. They're certainly in the same subject matter area. I just think for the public who's watching, I think to have those, because B or A evolves into B, and they're extremely interrelated. So I just for clarity's sake, if you'd be more pulling it, that's fine. I would move that we pull B to join with A, and so we have a broad conversation on both of those items.
I would support that. Is there anything we need to do since it was not mentioned in the approval of the
The
agenda?
final agenda, yeah.
No, you're accomplishing that goal at this point in time. Then the only item for approval on the consent agenda is item C.
Actually, there was a motion. Did you second it? Was it you that seconded it?
I don't think it was a motion. I think it was just a.
Well, you have to have a motion.
There was a motion to pull it.
Okay,
So-
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to pull item B under consent agenda to move up to the discussion after the presentation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that we adopt the consent agenda item C.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor King. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Motion carries unanimously. Now we'll go back to Madam Clerk
Okay.
for the Bay Oaks.
Bay Oaks is Betty Simpson, Bruce Butcher, and Jesse Field.
All right, congratulations. Thanks for coming out, Jesse. And CellCab?
CellCab is Barbara Hill, Betty Simpson, Sherry Smith, and Carrie Henderson.
Congratulations to them.
Now,
Thank
we
you.
need further action on that one then? Because we need a waiver for the 2 committees, and we need a waiver for the off-island.
That's correct.
I'll make a motion to approve the waiver for, who would be Betty and
Carrie.
Karen. Got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. And last, Public Safety Committee.
Public Safety is Heidi Jungworth, Dawn Thomas, and Karen Farrell.
And I believe, Karen, we would need to do that same waiver.
And I think Heidi as well.
And Heidi as well, yes. So that would be the waiver.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Congratulations and thank you for your service to the town. Moving on to the presentation, Emergency Berm and Estero Island Nourishment Project status. Mike, you up? We need to get you. Oh, well, we're going to need to get you a microphone here. Look at that, game changer. Game changer.
Could you say that for the mic on the mic?
Yeah,
So,
I would. Yeah, I think he said that if you want to follow along, go to fnbgov.com/beach, and you can follow along with the presentation. Yeah,
There
link
is-
at the top of the page.
There you go. Hold on, we got to get you a microphone mic. Yeah.
Good morning. For the record, Michael Poff, Coastal Engineering Consultants. Pleasure to be here and a privilege to be representing our consulting team for the beach project. While he's setting up the presentation, if you'd like me to discuss the two contracted amendments before you, if that would be at your pleasure.
Yeah, I think for the sake of time, I don't have any issues with that. Anybody else have a problem? Oh, go for it, Mike.
So we have two construction elements as part of the Beach Nourishment Program. The project we've been working on now for several years, and then the emergency berm, direct result of Hurricane Ian. So the additional work that Coastal Engineering Consultants and our team have to provide for you for the beach project is also a result of the storm because of needing more sand to be able to construct the project to its full template and address the devastating effects of Hurricane Ian. There's over 200,000 yards of erosion that occurred on the beach. So there's an offshore bar area that Lee County has been permitting. And then so for the town to be able to have adequate resources for sand to do the entire project that needs to be done, working with the county and the town and the permit agencies, we're adding the offshore bar area to the project. So the work to be done will be us providing the environmental assessment, mapping the corridors, and the other ancillary work related to adding those additional sand sources to your permit, which could be used for this construction event as well as future renourishment. So that's the work that's done for the beach project. The second one is for the emergency berm services. It's the construction phase services. It's us as your engineer of record to provide the construction administration, to do a pre-construction survey, to provide inspection work, to assist the town manage the contract for the emergency berm.
Does anyone have any questions for Mike concerning those two items? Guess you covered it.
Thank you. So again, Michael Poff, Coastal Engineering Consultants. We'll talk about the beach project as well as the emergency berm. I'll do a beach project update, talk about the funding. The construction easements are always a question for the residents, property owners. We'll talk about a little bit what happens during construction. Some of these slides we used at the presentation we gave last year, but I think it's important as we get closer to the construction window to keep talking about what's going to happen during the actual construction. And then the new topic is the emergency berm. Specific to the beach project, I'll list the beach fill segments and any updates we've made since I was here last with you, the impacts of the hurricane, the bar areas, which we just kind of touched on, the permit status, and update of the costs. The original project limits ran from Bowditch Point down to the south end into the critical wildlife area and to what is known as monuments, which are reference monuments established by the state, R207, which is around the Sun Caper condominium. The north segment is what was restored in 2011, went from Bowditch down to about Canal Street, R182. The central section ran from R182 to R203, 182 again at Canal, and 203 right around the Crescente and Bermuda Dunes and Leonardo to Arms. As we got through the process, the residents within that south central segment, basically from Lanark Avenue south down to those condominiums I just mentioned at R203, approached the town, approached Chad Schutz, your environmental manager, approached myself, saying we don't want to be in the managed beach program, we have an accretional beach, and as we said at that meeting, this is a town plan. And so you listen to them, we listen to them, and so that section was removed from the permit at their request. So we have the north to central sections, which will run from Bowditch to Lanark, and then basically from Crescente down to Sun Caper on the south side. These are the 3 beach fill plans. A lot of detail in these plans, so I encourage everyone to go onto the website and look at them, download them, study them. If you have questions, get back to Chad or I.
Mike, while you're going through that, real quick question.
Sure.
The section that you said that has chosen to be left out of the permit, how does that affect the emergency berm?
Emergency berm is the natural beach from that Canal Street to the south end of the island. It's independent of the beach fill permit limits. Emergency berm is separate and distinct. So there is emergency berm sand allowed to be placed in that central section. If they sign their easements and they want the emergency berm sand, it will be placed there.
That was my question.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And if they don't sign it, then there's no obligation to get the sand.
Correct. Hurricane Ian, the erosion on the north end, which was our original project, is around 57,000 cubic yards. That's eligible for FEMA reimbursement at 75%, and the state of Florida officials have told Chad and I the state's going to pick up the other 25%. But that has to go through a very formal, rigorous environmental review process. So in conjunction with the county and the DEP, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Bureau of Ocean Engineering Management, we are trying to get that sand fast-track permitted through the FEMA Environmental and Historic Preservation Review process so that it can be placed on the beach concurrent with the major beach restoration program. The natural beach suffered another 164,000 yards of erosion. FEMA has a whole separate eligible category called the Category B emergency berm. It's emergency work. It's temporary. It's designed to get sand on the beach within 6 months. It's a requirement to get in within 6 months, otherwise you have to go through that formal review process, and that would delay getting that sand out there. So FEMA is willing to come in and pay, again, 75%, and the state will pay the other 25%. So in essence, we can get 100% cost of that first 90,000 yards put on the beach, which is the emergency berm, and I'll talk about the more details of that at the end of my presentation, because I know that that is something that's new to everyone, but it's has to be done quickly in order to garner that money at 100%, and I'll talk about how we'll incorporate that into the major beach program. We did look for sand in the state waters closer to these islands. We found 2 small deposits. They have high silt content. Some of them have rock and gravel in them. So working with the county, they're processing this offshore bar area, and they, along with town staff and myself, met. It makes a lot of sense for both projects to have this bar area available to the Lee County Islands for now and for the future. So it's being added into the permit and will be in the 15-year permit. So the state issued the permit in January. The Corps of Engineers has published what's called their public notice. It was also advertised in a newspaper 3 consecutive Sundays. They're initiating consultation with their other agencies, U.S. Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries. And that's where we're doing that stack consultation with the county and the town to try to expedite at an emergency basis through these sub-agencies to the Corps of Engineers. And then if you do use the offshore bar area now or in the future, you get to sign an outer continental shelf lease with the Bureau of Ocean Engineering Management. We've done 4 of these projects in the Gulf for other clients. We're very familiar with what needs to be done. It's an additional layer of authority, but it really doesn't come with any additional requirements, because the requirements that they'll impose for environmental monitoring are the same as what the state and the federal agencies would require anyway. So there is an additional cost to locate those corridors, which is in that work order for you. Other than that, there is no additional fees that will be required. And that cost, the design and permitting costs, are paid for around 85% cost sharing by the state and by the TDC for the county. I believe the cost sharing for design and permitting, I believe it's 15% for the town. So a lot of the costs are being offset in this new work order for the beach project by the TDC funds and by the state funds that are available. So in March of 2022, when we presented to you, the volume was 905,000 yards at a cost of about $23 million. Fast forward to today, if we allow the emergency burn project to be completed and place at 89,000 yards at FEMA and state 100% cost share, the volume for the dredge project will be 1,036,000 yards at a cost of about $25.2 million. The volume difference is about 14.5% greater. The cost difference is about 9%. Reason being is there's some fixed costs that are going to be borne but aren't necessarily continuing through all of the volume. So once the contractor's pumping sand, it gets a little cheaper to put the extra yards on the beach while they're already here and mobilized.
Are we sharing this mobilization then with Lover's Key?
No, they'll be completely separate construction events.
Okay, because I thought they were really pretty hard hit by this storm.
They are, and they have a companion project that's moving forward as well.
Mike, this cost slide that you've got here at $25 million, this is for the renourishment program, is that correct?
That is correct.
So one of the things I don't think you mentioned, but by the way, there's a riveting interview on the town's website with Mike and Chad that discusses this in more granularity if people are interested. But in that interview, I think you discussed the emergency berm piece that's paid for entirely by the feds and the state. Is the aggregate cost of that emergency berm is a $7 million infusion of sand to the town of Fort Myers Beach. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir, and I'll be getting to that in a minute.
Well, you will be getting
Yes,
to that.
sir.
Okay, very good.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. I don't want to get ahead of you.
That's okay. So this is a chart that talks about the funding and then the effects of Ian. Design and permitting costs are across the top, and the budget is $502,000, of which the county and the state have approved, and a majority of that has been contracted into your agreements with the TDC and with the state, and the rest will be done through a new contract with the state that's coming up along with the construction funds. You can see the pre-Ian design, the $22 million, 905,000 yards. The town cost share of that, $932,000. The county's 7.55, and then DEP's 13.8. This is based on the critical wildlife area remaining in place, and all of the officials have told us at this time it's remaining in place, and the state intends to contract with the town to pass you that $13.8 million. So we talk about the losses from Ian on the north segment, that's the 57,000 yards. Cost of about $1.4 million if it's pumped concurrently with the beach project. And as I mentioned, the state and FEMA are going to pay 100% of that 57,000 yards. The FEMA emergency berm, the 89,000 yards, 100% FEMA and state. The additional losses from Ian, 74,000 yards, another $1.8 million. DEP has put in their recovery plan at 100% state cost. So the bottom line to the town is that number from the original project is still $931,000. Again, this is based on our estimates. It's going to be adjusted once we get bids. But the state in their recovery plan has proposed to offset all of the additional costs that normally would have been borne by the local sponsor. So when you talk to your legislators, please, please, please thank them for the additional appropriation that they did in December of $100 million across the state, and ask them to approve the other additional $105 million that will become before them in March during the regular session, at which time we've been told the additional monies will be available, which will cover all these additional state costs, the additional emergency berm, the additional volume for the sand, and the paying the local government share.
Just a clarification, you mentioned that you were informed that the state portion will remain state, and they will cover that? This is the critical wildlife area, I assume?
That is correct.
Okay, now is that, are they just saying they will commit to paying, or has that been legally decided?
I don't believe it has been legally concluded, but their Office of General Counsel has told the regulatory staff at this time it's a critical wildlife area and you should contract with the town and permit it accordingly and write a contract for $13.8 million.
Okay, now is there a chance that could be changed?
I guess there is always a chance.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Construction easements. Every project has to have a construction easement. It's required for us to work on private property. Must you sign your construction easement? The answer is simply, if you want sand, you have to sign it. It allows the town, the contractor, the monitors, everyone access private property.
Just another question, because I think at the last time this was done, that there was, in some areas, there was such a low level of compliance in the easements that they didn't do the project in those areas. Is there like a certain standard, a certain percentage of compliance you need in order to have this project go forward?
It's a great question. So the 2011 project, basically south of Canal, south of Crescent Beach, most of the property owners, as my understanding, I was not the engineer, I was a resident here in the local area, so I kind of read in the newspaper, but I was not involved with it personally, nor was our firm. But I understand that the majority of people did not sign their easements, which is why the beach project stopped at that location. So when you're hydraulically pumping sand at 10 to 20,000 yards a day, you can't skip every other lot. It's physically impossible for a dredge contractor to build and go in and out of every other lot or whatever. So we together will sit down with a map, and before the final bid is open, we will look at the easements that have been signed and the easements that haven't been signed and come to a decision on if they're the significant majority of the people in this area have not signed their easement, we're going to have to cut that out of the beach fill project, their private property portion.
That means, not to get too technical here, but that there is the ECL, or the, if there's no ECL, there's the mean high tide line, right? That is considered the end of the private property. And so with an easement, you do from the ECL landward, stopping at what the vegetation line or whatever the other standard is.
Correct.
But if they don't sign it, then the sand just goes from that ECL Gulf side.
Correct. Correct. So let me use this definition sketch to help clarify all that. I don't know, is there a pointer on here? Not sure. So I'll do my best using the colorations. And so which one? Red for red. All right. So the erosion control line exists from Bowditch Point to Lanark. And the erosion control line was established for the 2011 project. And so the existing grade of the beach is this dark brown, and it's this red profile. So this is the distance offshore into the Gulf, obviously blue being water, this being the land side, and these are elevations in the North American vertical datum. It's a geodetic datum that we use for surveys. And so private property, Gulfward ends at this point, so this is all private property. So to put the sand, to finish the profile on the landward side, we need to have access. Then the sand that's placed out here is placed on state-owned lands. If we don't have the easement, this sand does not get placed. It would stop right here. The contractor would build kind of a small little, basically a little training dike. They'd pump the sand on the seaward side, and there'd be a low-lying area on the landward side. It happened in the 2011 project. There was one large property owner just south of the pier. You remember seeing the pictures? It looked like a bathtub for years because they did not sign their easement, and that area was skipped and no private property work was done.
So, Mike, the sand on the seaward side, regardless of whether the easement is signed, does get placed?
Yes,
And so that'll be placed all along?
that is correct.
Okay.
It is providing there's a certain level of compliance.
Well, we're allowed to work seaward of the erosion control line from Bowditch to Lanark, and on the south end, the state, because it's critical wildlife area, we're allowed to place sand along all of that stretch.
All right, so just to be clear, so even if you don't get a certain percentage of landowners signing the easement, you'll still place sand, you just won't place it landward of the ECL.
Correct.
And Mike, just to give, and I know there's no such thing as an average plot of land on Fort Myers Beach, but and we'll get into some of the questions that people have about signing the easement here in a second, because I know there's some real questions about that. But just for the average landowner there, if they don't sign that easement and they don't get that sand placed on their property in front of the renourishment piece, what is the, if they were to do it themselves, or if they were later to regret not doing it or take part in this program, what I mean, I don't think people have a sense of the cost of putting this amount of sand on their property. What would it cost somebody privately to put that sand on there if they so choose to do so or needed to do so?
Well, we just opened bids for the emergency berm, which is 89,000 yards. It's $7.5 million. It's about $85, $90 a cubic yard. So obviously it depends on the size of the lot to fill that in. But if you took, say it's going to be 1,000 yards at $100 a yard, but that's assuming you can get it for $100 a yard. We got that price because you're doing 89,000, so it might even be higher per unit price to get sand trucked in at this time. So
the range
expensive.
would be in the tens of thousands of dollars?
Correct.
So they would be potentially leaving that on the table then if they chose not to sign the easement, if they chose later to need this or want this sand. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Since you're on that, real quick, it just made me think of a question. Should you choose not to sign the easement for whatever reason, does FEMA, should there be another storm, look down upon that, or could they potentially lose any type of benefits because they didn't participate in the program?
It's a great question. Let me research that and get back to you. I have not been asked that question before, and I have not experienced that before. Off the cuff, I don't think it would penalize you, the town, from requesting the Category G funding for the future. But let me check with the officials at FEMA and respond to you, if I may.
Yeah.
Mike, while we're on this slide here, the sand that's closest to the structure that's on private property, for the emergency berm, I understand that's sand that will be trucked in versus pumped in off from the ocean. Is that right?
That is correct. So the emergency berm, because it has happened in 6 months, it's being placed all in the uplands. The only allowance we have to do it right now is to truck it in from an inland sand mine.
Do you want to clarify? There's been some people that have reached out that said that they have concerns that trucked in sand will not be of the quality of the beach sand. Do you want to address that issue?
Sure. It will be slightly different because it's coming from an inland sand mine. It gets screened through screens, so there won't be any shell in it of any measurable because they put it through these screens to get down to a sand product. It's been used. Collier County has gone almost exclusively inland sand. It's coming from, there's 4 or 5 different sand mines that are approved on DEP's list within our kind of local area from Immokalee to Ortona. And so it is going to be slightly different than what the native beach is. But the offshore sand is coming from a sand body, or the nearshore sand is coming from a sand body that's underwater. That sand's been there for thousands of years. So once it gets pumped up on the beach and gets exposed to sunlight and to storms and rains and what have you, it starts to take on the characteristic of that native beach. The offshore bar area and nearshore bar area are much more similar to our native beach than the trucked in sand. So you'll see a slight difference in the upland sand. You'll see a slight difference when the offshore sand or the nearshore sand is pumped on the beach, but they will more quickly take on the characteristics of the native beach, again, as it gets kind of washed. We're going to put 1.0 million yards from the most compatible sources we have. We're only putting 89,000 yards of truck sand. So it's not going to change the character of the native beach on Estero Island. If you were just to come in and truck in 89,000 yards and do nothing else, you might see a little change in the characteristic. Because we're going to overwhelm it with that million yards, it should be, while noticeable for some period of time, our experience with these other projects that use a lot of truck sand is it just takes longer, takes more years of Mother Nature weathering it till it starts to look more natural.
And Mike, as an expert on sand, is the trucked-in sand, even though it's different, is it still considered quality sand?
Yes, sir. It has the right grain size distribution. It has the right color, albeit it's probably going to be slightly gray because we're working in a very fast time frame. In a perfect world, if we were going to use truck sand, I would ask the contractor to mine the sand, screen it, and spread it out and let the sun bleach it and let Mother Nature weather a little bit and then bring it to the beach. But since we're working in emergency conditions, we got to get it to the beach as fast as we can and let Mother Nature do her job on the beach once it's there.
Thank you.
I would just point out that I have some of that truck sand. We put it in to kind of shore up some scours, and it's very white. I don't know how good it is for making sandcastles. Haven't got there yet, but it is very white, whiter than the normal sand, and I'm sure after a while it'll all mix, like you said.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Now, the companion to the easements is the dune management plan. So I want to try to clear up any of the questions that are being asked and information being provided. The dune management plan's origin is the 2011 project. It was a requirement in order to get the county's funding. It's in the county code. It's also in your code. So in order to have public money spent from the TDC or from the town, you, the property owner, have to agree to have 75% of your lot frontage, Gulf parallel, planted, and it has to be a minimum of 10 feet wide. There's flexibility with the location of where those plantings can occur, and there is also flexibility with the planting plans. 3 planting plans were developed in the 2011 project. Chad didn't write them, I didn't write them. They were done by the predecessors in order to garner that funding and have a successful project that pretty much was done at 96% state and federal funding. So the town share was 4% for that project. You successfully worked with the property owners, and that's why you saw different dune features up and down the north end, because of the fact that there was those allowances. There's also an allowance to lower the dunes. So if they grow up too high, the property owner may come in, they may remove a volume of sand, lower it, have it replanted. The town, the town, are going to do the initial plantings and the initial work to establish the dunes. After that, it's the maintenance of the property owners.
Mike, on that, so essentially what you're saying is if the dune grows too high, the landowner could come in and lower it down to what, 2 feet or whatever that height is, replant it and start again?
Correct.
Would that person, would the town require them to get a permit before they could do that?
Where's Chad? I'm going to defer to.
It's a free permit.
Free permit.
Okay, thank you.
And so there was a request made, and I saw email traffic over the weekend about alternate planting regimes. And what I'll say to you is, you, the town, approved it, the county approved it, and the state approved the plan as is. If we want to make any changes, you'll have to make the request to change it and formally change it. We'll have to ask the county to accept it, and we'll have to ask the state to accept it. And so if you'd like us to explore alternate planting plans, that's something we can do on your behalf. I don't think it'll affect the end goal of starting construction late fall, but recognize there's 3 layers, local, county, and then state, that have to approve any changes to the dune management plan.
Now this dune management plan is applied to the emergency berm as well as the beach renourishment?
Great question. So again, kind of getting a little ahead of things, but the goal of the overall beach management plan is once the emergency berm is in place, we incorporate the major beach project into that feature, and then that would be your planted feature. Then the property owners have the ability to have us adjust the location of that sand. At that point, once the emergency berm is done and in, and we start pumping sand onto the beach, and now it becomes part of the beach project, it's in the permitted limits, it's now part of the dune management plan. It could be lowered as well, And those 3 planting regimes, or more if we go that route, could be all incorporated. So in a perfect setting, we'll come in and we'll put in the emergency berm. Depending on the timing of the beach project, either do some plantings now or wait and pump the sand and do the plantings at the end and work with the property owners to adjust the height and adjust the planting regimes to try to achieve that 75% 10-foot wide requirement down the beach.
So Mike, assuming, should the council decide that they want to explore more options of the vegetation to encourage more people to sign these easements, that would not stop or slow down the process of the emergency berm?
Correct. It would not slow down the beach project or the emergency berm.
And you believe that if that was the route that the council took, it wouldn't hold up the start of the full beach renourishment?
That is correct.
Okay.
I can't promise you we can get them permitted. I've never seen a dune, not that I've been to every beach in Southwest Florida, but I've never seen a dune planted with just a railroad vine. I don't know I'm not a plant biologist, so I will defer to the scientists and the biologists of the county and the state to see if they would accept that plan.
Would it be a requirement that the entire dune be whatever species that is, or can there be separate species on the island? Or does the berm have to be one consistent vegetation throughout?
No, the 3 planting regimes have 3 different plant types of different percentages, and so that already exists. And what I heard today was, could we do 100% railroad vine, or maybe 90% railroad vine and a slight mixture of the other 2 species? So that would just be a different percentage and ratio of the 3 plants that are in the plan.
So you're basically what you're saying is your experience, you've never seen an island or a berm done in just one railroad vine, but
correct.
If a railroad vine was an option that was presented to an easement signer, that it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the entire island. It would just have to be mixed with something else, one of the other 2 vegetations.
I would certainly recommend it. Based on my limited knowledge of the plants, having a variety of species helps all of the species to thrive. Like I said, I've never seen 100% just one species on a dune. So not to say that didn't happen somewhere, I'm just not familiar with it. So
I just want to kind of clarify. So the one thing I thought you heard you say is that if we do the emergency, someone does the emergency berm and they vegetate that, then that pretty much is their dune obligation.
That is
the
correct.
Beach, that when the renourishment happens, there's no additional plants to go.
That is correct.
Right. The other side is now, are we obligated to have vegetation in for the emergency berm, because the emergency berm is on a tighter timeline? We want to get this wrapped up as soon as we can to not interfere with turtle season.
Sure.
Right?
No, there is no planting requirement of an emergency berm. FEMA has no planting requirement. FEMA does not approve the dune management plan. The requirement of the dune management plan is to get county TDC money and county approval and town approval per your codes.
Right.
So FEMA calls the emergency berm temporary work. It's not expected to actually last. If we were just to put the emergency berm in and we don't even do the beach project, expect the next big storm is going to take that emergency berm and move it landward in overwash. So the only reason it's working out is because we have a renourishment scheduled right behind it that we can incorporate that all together and, like you said, make that part of the plan. So if a property owner likes the berm location where it is and wants to have us plant it before the renourishment, we can probably make that happen. Or if we don't want to wait and let the renourishment happen and everyone says, well, we'd like to have it a little bit lower, we can do that. We can knock, at that point, it's now in our permit, which allows us to lower the dune.
So Mike, from a practical standpoint, if somebody's watching and they like this potential 4th option, which is the railroad vine, or some iteration of it, if they like that option and they realize that you're going to attempt to see if we could get that through, timing wise, how would you advise them manage their decision on the easement? Could they sign the easement under the premise that the 4th option would be approved, and then pull back at that point, or how would they manage their easement decision given their interest in this 4th option?
If they want emergency berm sand, they should sign the easement now and work with us to try to get another option added if that's what works. We have to know by 2 or 3 weeks from today, before the contractor starts trucking in sand, where we can put this sand. And if we don't have easements, we're not going to put sand there. So my recommendation is sign your easements, get in the program, and work with the town staff and myself to manage it to your expectations. I got to be honest with you, in my 30 years working from Sarasota to Marco, this is the most resident-friendly easement I've ever seen. And I don't know anybody else has a dune management plan that allows you to lower the dune and make this kind of species changes. Most municipalities, everybody gets the same dune, it's the same height, it's the same location, it's the same planting plan. And while we have people who don't sign their easements and we do put gaps in the project, they've been very small gaps. 1,000 foot here on a 4-mile section, we might have a 1,000-foot gap because property owners don't want to sign their easements. But
Mike, while we're on this subject, if I could defer to our town attorney for a second, because in our interview the other day, there were a couple legal questions that we'd had that were some of the people that had concerns had, and I just wanted to see if our town attorney could help us with that. It was stated to me by somebody who had concerns that the easement clearly states that the public will be able to walk through private property. Is that your understanding of the easement, Mr. Town Attorney?
The easement as currently drafted gives certain rights as specified in the document for the easement area and only the easement area. So, to the extent that it grants the general public right of access, it is through that easement area. And so the limits of where the general public can go is a function of the legal description of the actual easement that it gets executed.
What's that mean from a practical standpoint?
Yeah, what does that mean? That means that unless the easement is right up against the, let me give you an example, not necessarily a true example, but right up against a pool, where people are traversing right, within reaching out and touching someone on a pool deck, then obviously that's where it would be. But if there's 100 feet, 50 feet, 40 feet, 30 feet, whatever it is between the easement and that pool deck, then in that intervening area, that is treated as private property. It is private property, and the upland owner would have the right to exclude anyone from that area.
John, just so to help you understand this, so I could understand having an easement which allowed the town to come in and the contractor to come in. Why does the easement allow the public to come in, or is that a misunderstanding how this is written?
Well, it's a dual function. Part of it is the result of a very contested issue a number of years ago. I believe it was in Escambia County, where a group of property owners who received the benefit of the beach renourishment and the sand being placed and their beach being expanded, then took the position that as property owners adjacent to that expanded beach, they received that benefit and it was their beach and it was private. And the United States Supreme Court went all the way through the court systems, the appellate level, the Florida Supreme Court, and ultimately the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court said that if a government comes and puts beach behind your property, no, it's not yours. It's the public. The taxpayers' money has been used to expand the beach. You get the benefit of that in the way of protection and against storm surge and things of that nature, but that is public area, and therefore you don't have the right to exclude people. So what has happened as a result of that, through the development of these easements, and we used a form that was I think published by either DEP or FEMA or a combination of both, the state agencies have added in that language to reflect that court decision, that if we're using taxpayers' money to provide a benefit, then everyone should be able to enjoy it.
So this is a standard language based upon the court's
Yes, sir.
decisions. It's not some sort of a whim from the town here. This is something very standard in the easement process. But it's still interesting. It's still helpful for people to know that. And John, the other question I had, or it was asked from a number of folks, is that it's a 15-year easement. And Mike had explained that it's because of the permit's a 15-year permit. But the question that I get asked is, if people sign this easement, are there any tentacles that extend or any residual effects that extend beyond the 15 years to the property owner if they sign the easement, or does everything end at the end of the 15 years?
If the term is for 15 years, it ends at 15 years. I think that to the consultant's comment that he made before is correct. I have seen some of these easements. One that immediately comes to mind, a private client in Palm Beach County. The beach nourishment project was taking place in that area, and the approach of Palm Beach County was, one, here's the easement, it's non-negotiable, and two, 100% buy-in or we're not spending a dime. And so, you know, we're trying to be as accommodating as possible. If there's a direction from this council to work on further on the form of the easement, we'll do so, and make it as property owner friendly, I believe was the term that was used, as possible.
Thank you.
Well, I just have a question, and this is my clarification. So on that easement area, the notes number 1 says the seaward limit of the easement area is the mean high water line or the erosion control line. Does that mean that if that easement area is approved and you bring in sand, so that sand then goes out to where those 2 arrows are, where it says mean high water line and then it comes on 10-foot wide at grade? So that sand then comes out to like that little T that's there over on the easement area part.
Over here?
Right there. Yeah, so does that mean the sand then, when you have that easement, it comes out that far to
Yes.
that area? Is that what that's
Yes.
signifying? Okay. Okay.
John, just another clarification on the effect of the kind of the private property rights here. So as I understand it, they put sand down between the ECL and the landward, that becomes public, but that expires after the 15 years? So then it goes back to the original ECL?
Not to get too far into the weeds, but there is a concept that is recognized by Florida law and has been codified in legislation that it's called the public use doctrine. So if over time the general public uses a portion of the beach that otherwise might be considered to be public or is public, private, the public has acquired a right to use that area in the manner that's customary to what's been taking place. Doesn't mean that all of a sudden the people can start throwing public parties or things like that, but if they're sunbathing, they're transiting, then they've acquired that right. Whether or not that continues to exist past the 15 years, to the question that was asked, that's an issue of fact, but the easement will expire. So there's not an easement, there's not a right of passage as deriving from the easement. There may be a public use doctrine right that's separate and distinct from the easement.
And so, but that customary use, like you said, is not absolute, right?
No, sir.
There's some dispute about it. And so you could also probably argue, and I'm just trying to investigate this a little bit, but that if someone allows, they sign the easement and they put the sand there, and now that is for the 15 years use of the public, that could that be construed as establishing
Customary use?
Customary use?
Possibly.
All right.
Just real quick, Mike, before you move on back to the vegetation thing. So based on how soon we need to get this through for the emergency berm, would you need a decision from the council today as to adding a 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever vegetation to it to keep the process moving and to maybe give some clarification to those that are on the fence about signing the easement? Is that a decision you would need today or at the next council meeting, or when would you need that to be able to start the process?
As soon as possible, but I would say we have a little bit of time, maybe the next week or two would be fine. But we really need to have those easements, as many of them as possible, signed before we give notice of award, notice to proceed to the contractor, so we have an idea of where we're going to have gaps and where we can build. So at most 3 weeks from now, but if you wait till the 3 weeks and they don't sign, they don't come in right away. So
Well, we don't meet again in that time frame, so go ahead and finish your presentation. I think we'll bring it back to the council and see if there's an appetite to direct you to add those other things, or see if it's possible through the county and the state.
Okay.
Thanks.
So for the overall beach project, the goal is to start late fall, 9-month construction window. There's some conservative time in there depending on winter weather and how much downtime they experience. We do allow the contractor to sequence their construction. With that said, our recommendation is to start in the area of greatest need, which right now is the south end. The Corps of Engineers is planning on dredging Matanzas Pass, the channel, between August and November. They place the sand in a nearshore disposal south of the pier. So we can't have both contractors working at the same place at the same time. So that will also affect the ability to work on the north during that period of time. But we also have shorebird and sea turtle nesting considerations. We're not allowed to work in the critical wildlife area after shorebird nesting season begins. I believe it's March 1st. So it's lining up that we would start in the south, get the south done, and then move to the north. That way we avoid the Corps of Engineers contractor in the pass, and we would avoid any issues with the species on the south end.
Mike, just so we're clear, the emergency berm trucked-in sand process would begin in a perfect world when?
That's my last slide.
I'm sorry.
As far as construction access and staging, we know we have Newton Park, which is what you own. The county has indicated maybe Bowditch Point might be possible, but they have to allow the dredge contractor for the Corps to go in and out of Bowditch, so Bowditch may not be available or maybe partially available. I know Chad's been talking to a multitude of property owners on the beach trying to ask for not just the temporary construction easement along your parallel to your property, but also a perpendicular access. So if there's a vacant lot and they're not planning on doing any construction between now and the beach project, they could allow access for the contractor to come out on the beach. So I know he's targeted several property owners who have expressed an interest in trying to help out. So if there are property owners out there that have vacant lots and or width to get construction equipment, bulldozers, and all of the yellow equipment onto the beach, we would need a couple, ideally north, central, and south would be very helpful. The more we have for the contractor, the lower your bid's going to be because of ease of access for them. Otherwise, they'll just use ramp barges. They'll bring it all in like Storm in Normandy and offload it on the beach, but that drives the cost up considerably if they have to do it that way.
Well, I'll tell you right now, there is a wealth of vacant lots.
Unfortunately so, yes, there is. So when the dredger sets up, they will have their pipeline. It's submerged from an offshore pump out area coming up to the beach. We have several landings, 2 in the north end, 2 in the south end, pretty much coming in at the same place. These corridors are aligned with these pump out areas, the path of least resistance, avoiding anything on the nautical chart, avoiding any artificial reefs that we know about. They've been surveyed and or will be surveyed before the construction to make sure there's no resources in that swath to have the pipeline come to the beach. So during construction, this is what it looks like. These are some pictures of some representative projects. So they start pumping and the sand's coming out the pipe. They build themselves a platform. The pipe will then be turned and run 90 degrees down the beach. They will be pumping sand and building training dikes to control and build the template that's been designed. Once the template's been designed and graded, the picture on the far right is the pipeline remains on place till that section is done. So they may only be pumping sand in front of anyone's individual home for 1 or 2 days, but the area of active construction is typically about 1,000 feet wide, and then 2 weeks later, that 1,000 feet will move down the beach, or 3 weeks later if you have bad weather. But the pipeline has to stay on until we're done with that segment. So once it comes on shore, it'll be there for a couple of months till we get each of the north and central and south segments done. They built sand ramps at pretty much every access so we can walk over the pipe. So they don't preclude the public from getting over the pipe, but recognize that we're in a construction zone. So there is going to be disruption. There's going to be the beep, 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 backup alarms. There's going to be light plants out there at night. And so what I encourage everyone is, it's a construction zone, be very careful, but also enjoy it. And as soon as they move that orange construction fence, it's a race to the beach to try to get the new seashells that are out there. So there is that benefit too. Then for 3 years after construction, so if we finish, and the goal will be finished by May 1st of 2024, then 2025, 2026, 2027, we have to till the beach. It loosens the sand for the sea turtles, and we'll do that in late February, early March every year. It's a permit requirement. There's also sea turtle lighting compliance, so the staff will have to do these lighting surveys. And then we do annual monitoring, which has been going on. Actually, you've been having us do the annual monitoring now for many years. Let's talk about the berm. So because FEMA has this emergency provision, and because the FEMA and state officials stepped up and said, because of the devastating effect to the local governments, we're paying 100% of the costs, and because we were going to be building the majority of this sand placement area anyway and refilling in all those scour holes and up against the properties, the whatever seawall might have been there, whatever old vegetation line whatever was there, we're trying to restore things as close as possible. We do have summer surveys that show us what the beach was. They're every 1,000 feet down the beach. So we don't have everybody's individual property and exactly what it looked like before we started. We're going to do our very best to put things back the way it was, recognizing that contractors can't, as I said, there's tens of thousands of yards being pumped on a daily basis. We'll do our best to get it graded and then work with the property owners to fix things if we need to. And so I'm not going to go through the math and the details, but there's a very specific requirement that FEMA says you have to meet to get an emergency berm, and you have to build it the way we tell you to build it. So the construction plans are posted online. It's at that same, right, Chad? It's at the fmbgov.com/beach. So the plans are online. These are those cross sections again. So you have your distance offshore. Here's your water line. I apologize that we picked probably two colors that aren't different enough, but the red is the summer survey, so prior to the storm, and the orange is after the storm. At this particular profile, R185, it's about 3,000 feet south of the pier. The majority of the erosion was the existing dune was wiped out. So this red line that's now orange, so FEMA says that's your emergency berm, we're going to put that sand back in place. So in this case, we're rebuilding exactly what was there because we happen to have a profile right at that location. In this area, this is now well down south of Newton, huge scour hole. And you can see the red grade. We can't quite get all of the sand volume from FEMA put back in place, but we can get the majority of it. FEMA allows you to fill the scour hole and then put the berm on top. And so, as I said, we're trying to, as best we can, mimic what was there ahead of time. People have said, we never had elevations of 6.5, 7 feet on the island before the storm. Well, we did. And here are proof positive. There is at least a half a dozen of the profiles where we did have those existing dune features at that grade. FEMA requires you to bring it to elevation 6.5 in order to get the money. But like I said, once we put the sand in place, it's incorporated into the master program. FEMA's long gone. It's emergency work. It doesn't have to be maintained. We can look at to work with the property owners to plant it, lower it, adjust it, et cetera.
And I think just a little bit more clarification, because when you talk about that 6 foot or 6.5 foot sand, some people think that that's 6 additional feet from what is there now, and that is not the case. So there's some people that feel that when you say 6 feet, they're going to have a 6 foot sand dune in front of their house. So if you can just quickly explain how on the left there you've got 5 feet.
Absolutely, I didn't realize that was
yeah, that some people aren't clear on that.
A challenge. Sorry. So the average mean high water line is plus 0.3 NAVD. So that's the average of when the high tide comes up and back. So it's going to be 6 feet above that water line in elevation. And so, as I said, prior to the storm at this location, it already was at 6.5 feet. In this case, it was like 6.7 feet. So the existing beach right now is about plus 3 right here. So in this case, we'll get a 3.5 foot high addition of sand. In this case, we have the scour hole. And so in this case, we are getting 6 feet But that's from, from the bottom of the scour hole. If the scour hole wasn't there, again, you'd be around +2, +3, and you'd be getting about 3 feet of sand. So only where we have scour holes will you see actually 6 feet of vertical placement.
Okay, thanks for
But I'm pretty sure
clarifying.
they're going to want the scour holes filled in. I
Right.
don't know anybody that has not said
Right.
just the opposite, fill it as fast as you can. So lastly, the schedule. And so the bids were submitted on Friday. They were opened. We have 3 bidders between $7.5 million and $8.9 million. So we're vetting the references of the low bidder to make sure they're qualified. And so we'll make a recommendation to purchasing and to the clerk later today. Hopefully we'll hear back from the references and then move to whenever you are able. I understand there might be a special meeting that the council might be having that will be added on to. I'll defer to
Yeah,
Amy
I'm
and
glad
John.
you reminded me. I was supposed to mention that at the beginning. At 10 o'clock on Thursday, there will be a special meeting of the council to award the bid contract that you're referring to. So at 10 o'clock this coming Thursday, there'll be a special meeting for that awarding of the bid. Thank you for the reminder.
And construction March through June. And then if we decide as a community we want to plant the berm right away, we can plant. It'll be a separate contract. We do that way the local bidders can all bid on it. But again, it's not a requirement of FEMA, but we all know the dune plants have a stabilizing effect. And if we can all work out together the different planting plans and locations as quickly as possible, then we'll try to plant. Otherwise, we'll plant after the renourishment's done.
So just kind of conceptually, because we were already working on this before the hurricane, already had a plan in place, we were in really good shape to get the renourishment done quickly. But it seems to me that I know that the emergency berm is there for a 5-year storm, but really we're just going to have it there for the summer, right? I mean, I know there's places on the island where it's desperately needed, but really we're just trying to get through the summer.
In a perfect scenario, you're correct. Yes, sir. That's correct. It has to survive through hurricane season through, I would say the earliest we'd be pumping is really October, November. So, because we can't start on the south end until after nesting season, and the contractor for the county working the north end. So if we target when that last nest comes off the beach onto the south side in October, we'd be started pumping the next day would be the perfect timing.
And you share with the new, where does the new state program come in that they've just come out with that they'll match for sand placement up to $150,000?
That's a great question. Right now, they're drafting the rule on how that money would be provided to the property owners and what will be required. I have yet to see that draft rule come out, and so I can't answer any questions, unfortunately, today because I don't have that, but as soon as it is issued, you have more information?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
So if you go to floridadep.gov.
You have to identify yourself. We know.
Sorry, Chad Schutz, environmental staff, town of Fort Myers Beach. It is out just as of February 1st. Again, floridadep.gov/hurricane. The qualifying applicants, qualifying projects, etc., qualifying costs are all there.
I'm not disputing that. Where in the whole scheme does it fit? Between the emergency berm, the beach renourishment, is it come in the middle?
So we've had property owners that are eager to get their properties back in shape and bring in beach compatible sand. I've worked with a number of our beach vendors and people who are helping out property owners to, they have to get permitted by the town, and then that's one of the requirements to submit. So if they want to get their beach back in shape and bring in sand themselves, save all your truck receipts, save all your construction receipts, etc., and documentation that's required to make that application, and they can start restoring their beach, as they've done for the last few months, and get a one-to-one match from the state for qualifying projects and qualifying properties.
Thanks.
Yep.
So 1-to-1 match means that they pay 50% and you pay 50%.
So if you spent, say, $10,000 on sand, my understanding is if it's a qualifying property from a qualifying applicant for qualifying cost, $5,000.
A lot of qualifiers there.
Yes, sir. Always.
And then ultimately, for the beach project, if people do bring sand in now, it would reduce the volume we pump from the offshore bar area. And so we have 2 different sketches. So here's what it would look like for the emergency berm in terms of, in this case, we took a post-Ian eroded profile and showed that the beach has been lowered. So the average beach grade was around +4.5, +5, up to +6.5. In this case, we have a little scour hole down to about +2, and we're showing the berm up to +6.5. And so this is happens to be a property. This is just a simple another example of what the definition sketch for the easement area is, how it relates to the emergency berm until the major project is put in place. And I believe, yes, that's my last slide.
Well, as always, Mike, it's very educational. You're very well prepared, and we appreciate it. I want to bring it back to the council to have that discussion now about if there's an appetite to add potentially, and just for clarity, if the council decides to do to add this fourth option to go forward to the county to see their approval in the state, would that have any effect on our permit? Would we have to re-permit based on this change?
We would have to request a modification to the state permit that's already been issued to include dune management plan revisions. So it has to be reviewed by the county and by the state. Because we're still in federal permitting and the Corps of Engineers does not have a requirement for the dune management plan, they won't be reviewing the dune management plan. So it'll be going through just the county and the FDEP, which also means the sub-agencies, the DEP, the FWC, and others are all entitled to have a review of any modification.
Okay.
So, and because, again, because
I
there's
think
permitting
what,
time frame,
I
we're
think
okay.
I think what the mayor's asking, I think, just to make sure I'm clear, is can the fourth option that we may be discussing here in a minute, can that be done in concert with the process that's already in place and not be disruptive?
Yes.
I guess I think that's what he's asking.
Yes.
It won't slow us down.
That is correct.
By
It will
making
not
this
slow
request.
us down.
Okay, all right.
So I guess we'll come back to the council. You want to have this discussion about, do we want to add this, potentially add this fourth option to entice those that may be on the fence to sign the easement? Because I think, as you've explained, Mike, very eloquently, that we need as many as possible, if not all, to do it. And if this is a potential way to get more people to sign on, obviously, as you stated, it still has to go through the county and the state's approval, but it could be something that this council could do to help the people who have some reservations about signing the easement at this time.
Correct. As far as the actual time frame to have it approved, so let's say today you say, Michael and Chad, please add that. We would reach out to the county. We would reach out to the state. We would request that modification on your behalf, and it would take, for the state, they're allowed by law 30 days to review it and respond to us. And if they approve it, then they have up to 60 days to issue the modification. So if you tell me today, yes, we still might not know for 90 days if it's real or not. So that's why I'm saying, as far as the easements go, if you want to wait for us to have absolute 100% proof that it's a good one, it'll be too late. We're already being construction. The emergency berm sand will be coming in. So that's just the way, the status of how it is. We can't change that time frame.
And I think everybody understands that. At least I understand it. So I would think that my fellow councilors understand what you're saying. I'll come back to the council. We'll start down there with you, Councilor King.
Do we need this as a motion, or is consensus good enough, or?
Well, I think we'll have to do a motion, but I want to see if there is there's an appetite for this council to add that fourth. Is it railroad vine? Is that what it's called?
Well, yeah, I think that's the question, Mr. Mayor. It sounded, I thought it was 100% railroad vine, but I thought I heard that maybe a little bit nuanced, maybe on the ends, or is it 100% railroad vine? I thought I heard something else mixed in with that this morning, but I may have misheard the.
Well, I'm not a plant specialist, so
maybe we'll call it the low or the high visibility option, or the higher visibility option with the.
Maybe that's a question for Mike. Does it have to be very granular, and this is specific plant we're talking about, or can it be an open-ended kind of thing to the, potentially 2 or 3 options, or do you have to specifically identify each vegetation?
Sure. So when we advertise for the dune planting contract, the more options you give everybody, the more management will be required on behalf of the town, myself, and the dune planting contractor to plant every individual lot differently. So I don't encourage you to go open-ended. Because someone may say, I want 62.3% railroad vine and 12 point, you know, you can get to the point where you have way too many options, and to try to comply and have a contractor bid the job, he needs to know how many plants to bid, and then there's a guarantee on those plants. So we really need to lock in. So if you wanted to add a 100% railroad vine option, then I would say that would be the fourth option to add. And if somebody wants to add a couple of daisies, they do recruit. So if your neighbor has some beach daisies and some sea oats, they're going to start to recruit over time, as we know. Same with the railroad vine. And so it will also recruit into your neighbors. And so, again, I'm not a plant biologist, and so I caveat all these with, it's going to be reviewed by the scientists at the state and the county as to, is this really truly an ecological vegetative function for a dune, or is it just simply to get somebody to sign an easement? And I don't know how that's going to shake out.
Yeah, and I would just point out that I understand the low visibility thing, but there's other ways to get there. I know the town did a beach dune demonstration project, and we put in the same mix that was recommended. It was the sea oats, it was the panic grass, the sunflower, and the railroad vines. After a couple of years, there was nothing left but the sea oats. Everything else, a couple of washovers, things do. And I understand, the like some things like the dune sunflower, and we talk about this all the time with my wife, is that they kind of die ugly. So they look good, they're low, but then they turn black. And they take quite a bit of maintenance and leave a bit of debris in the sand. There's other things like beach elder, and I was just having a conversation with someone from the Naples Botanical Gardens, and they said they think that should be more of a prominent plant because it comes back fast, and it's coming back in our yard now, and it's low-lying. So I think if we want to come up with a different plant mix, I think we want to do some thought. And the redwood vines are pioneering species, so they very aggressively put runners out to get into other places in the sand. And in the wet season, they can grow like an inch a day. It's really phenomenal. I don't know if they have the root structure that really binds the sand like the sea oats. The sea oats are the tanks. So I think that a monoculture in any way would probably be a hard sell to anybody who really knows about the dune biology. That it's got to be a mix of things, because some things like areas, some things don't like those areas.
Well, I understand. So I guess if our ultimate goal is to get the maximum amount of easements signed, and by adding a fourth option can get us more people to sign on, to me it makes sense to add an option, at least that fourth option. So with that, I'll make a motion to direct Mike and staff to add the fourth option, or at least pursue getting the fourth option approved through the county and the state for the railroad vine.
Well, I'll second that, Mr. Mayor. And again, under the premise, Mike, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that this won't adversely impact the process that's already in place by creating this or seeking out approval for the fourth option.
That'll be the first thing in my request. We'll say that specifically.
Okay. And I was just wondering whether it would be, you think, a good strategic thing to say that we would have a more open option where you'd say, here's a list of plants you can put down, but a certain percentage has to be, say, sea oats. A certain percentage has to be something, and it has to be at least so many plants. So instead of relying on the same 4 plants we always do, we allow some flexibilities to people to say that once they've got their commitment of putting in native dune vegetation, then the remainder they can do at will.
We can do whatever we want. As I'm saying, to tell the plant contractor how to bid a project, we would have to have all of the properties identified, so you know how many plants to bring. And so it's like going to the grocery store. If you tell you go get 3 items, then you're going to get prompt, timely bids. Now, dune plants aren't necessarily the most expensive part of the project, and so, but to manage it and make sure that we get the plant types correct could be a challenge. So I don't like the open-ended, but if that's the will of the council, then we'll certainly try to figure out how to do it.
What if we made part of this this additional option that the financial obligation, national planting, became the burden of the property owner and not the project? So if you wanted this option and you wanted that flexibility, then basically you had to pay for the plants.
How do you enforce if they don't put them in then? Because now they've got the sand.
Yeah, I mean, is this a decision that has to be part of this motion? is, I mean, is it something that we can discuss? We don't even know for sure that the county and the state would say, yes, we want to modify it. So we could be putting the cart before the horse here. Can we have this discussion, should they choose to want to add this fourth option to the permit at a later time?
Yes.
Okay. My last question for you, well, I guess hopefully my last question for you is, you say open-ended, you use this term open-ended, and then you had made a brief comment about someone on a property having 12% here, 12% there. I guess my understanding, maybe that's just my fault for assuming, I would have assumed if this is your property and this is the plant that you want, that would be the entire length of your property. You wouldn't have the option of doing 10% sea oats, 5%, you know, that you couldn't mix and match, that it would be for your property one specific species.
The three planting plans that were in the original 2011 agreement, and we carried forward to now, dune management plan, and we carried forward to now, it's the same three species of plants, it's just a different percentage within that 75% of your property. So one is heavy sea oats and light on the other two, one's heavy on the other two, light on the sea oats, and one in between. And so property owner A would say, I want the heavy sea oats, property owner B would say, I want light sea oats, and so we have three different planting regimes, so the dune contractor would know, all right, we have X number of properties, and the planting spacing is set in the dune management plan. I know how many plants I need, and so this property gets planting plan A, this one gets B, this one gets C, this was C, this is C, this is B, that's A. So that's why it's three different ratios of percentages. Does that help clarify it?
Yeah, it does. I think we're giving Chad a headache. He's pacing back there. He wants to say something.
I didn't review this with him before I said those comments, so it's on me, not you.
Right, so, and just talking with one of our property owners that was concerned about having a view and maintaining that view, staff worked over the weekend and tried to, you know, kind of creatively distribute the higher profile plants and the lower profile plants to allow for views where they wanted views, and then put maybe like the sea oats in places where we need a vegetative blind, as Mr. Perry likes to call it, for say their beach vendor equipment. So instead of having, you know, strips uniform across 15% this, 20% that, etc., we put the 15% where we needed the vegetative blind to shield beach vendor operations, and did the lower profile plants kind of in front of the pool area to accommodate that that want. So it sounds like, and that's just an illustration of what staff wants. We want to work with people, hear what they want, and try and figure it out. I mean, the easiest thing for me to do is say, we're going to go put out sand, no vegetation, let's do it, and my job would be a lot easier. So I'm trying to work with property owners to try and, you know, meet in the middle, so to speak.
So Chad, what you just suggested, does that fit under one of the existing three options?
It does, yeah, and I can share it with y'all. Again, if you can imagine a property where you have a expansive pool area where you want a view, and an area where you're going to have some storage for, say, jet skis, beach furniture, etc., you'd want to put that storage area behind something that's going to vegetative blind, stop the sea turtles from going in, etc. Whereas on the more expansive spot, we have the lower profile dune daisies, railroad vine, and then at the on this one I put kind of the bitter panicum grass kind of at the bottom because it is kind of one of the taller ones. And to his point, you know, it is a, you know, quote unquote snow fence, but the other side of that is it'll stop the sand from going into the pool area. And then again, that's why we we made sure that we put that dune height modification in there and kept that in there for the concerns about having a big dune out in front of a place where we want to have a view.
So did you get a sense in your conversation with that particular owner that you'd reached consensus on that, or did you, or are you not at liberty to say?
No, it sounds like it. It sounds like it.
But you just said railroad vine would be included in that.
Yeah, railroad vine's included in all of them. It's just it's a much smaller percentage because of its nature. It's a colonizing species that's going to go out, and it's these plans are trying to mimic nature, so that's kind of what you see in a natural dune ecosystem. Those comparable percentages. So that's what we're going for, and that's why those percentages are the way that they are.
Well, I have to admit, I might be a little confused now, because it was my understanding that you couldn't use railroad vegetation unless we directed you to add it to one of the 3 current.
It's part of one of the, it's part of all the options.
To clarify, it's one of the plants of the 3 plants in all the options. It's just not 100%.
Now I got it.
Okay.
Now I see what you're saying, the 100%. So you're saying if we did this, they could then potentially do 100% of their property in just this vegetation?
No.
Well, they have to do a minimum of 75% of the frontage. And the plants are planted 18 inches on center and they offset each other. And so if I am property owner A, I might get the 60% sea oats, 20% bitter panicum, 20% railroad vine, and I would have the planter come in and the first row would be sea oats and the second row would be bitter panicum, the third row would be a railroad vine, sea oats. So I get the right percentages, but I'm leaving that 25% of my property unvegetated, which is what I'm allowed to do. What this, I understand the property owner is asking is, I want to put every 18 inches on center on offset, just railroad vine over 75% of my coverage. Just one species, that would be it. And what Chad is suggesting is go with the one that has the lowest amount of sea oats. So on the right side of the property, we got lots of sea oats. In the middle where the pool is, we have our 25% gap, and we have the low species. And over here, we have a little more sea oats. That way, he still has the view, or she has the view, and we achieve it with the planting mix we have, and you don't have to have me spend my time and your money trying to get a 4th one added.
Okay, well, with that, then I will withdraw my motion.
I do have a couple
Kudos.
questions. I'm not sure if this is the right place for them or not, because they just occurred to me. When you get that Medicare age, things don't, synapses don't connect as well as they used to. But Chad, it seems like early on in this process, when we were talking, and I'll just use the condo where I live as an example, Islands End, it seemed like there was enough vegetation there that we would not be required to plant more vegetation. Is that correct? Does that still hold true?
Yes, sir. That's stipulated by the dune management plan. If you already meet the vegetative coverage, if you will, of your shoreline, then there's no need to plant.
So that's something for others to take into consideration as well.
Yes, sir.
Signing easements. The other is you're talking about reducing the dune height. I assume you're talking about removing sand then?
Correct. So you
What happens to that?
spread it out evenly in front of your property, so it still stays in your property, but just unvegetated sand spread out, and then replant that dune. And just another point, in that dune management plan, you have an instruction sheet where staff is going to record your property, the owner, the strap, etc., and then have an aerial of where we're putting the dune plantings, where we have sand, where we're maintaining open sand, so that maintenance configuration, if you will, is agreed upon, property owners happy, staff's happy, and it can be maintained in perpetuity for the permit.
Thanks.
Any other questions for
Now, I would just take an observation too that in my experience that the dune vegetation that runs parallel to the beach doesn't really create big dunes, that when they run perpendicular to the beach and you catch the wind-blown sand, that's when you get the really big dunes. Or if you just happen to be downwind of someone who really rakes heavily. So I never, in my house, we've been aggressively planting dunes, and I've never seen them get over, a foot or two of an actual dune.
I just one wrap-up question, Mike. If it is the wrap-up, maybe others still have questions. But just to take this up 10,000 feet, we lost a lot of sand. We'd already had a sand deficit, which is why we had the renourishment plan. But we lost a lot of sand as a result of Hurricane Ian, and the combination of these two phases, the berm phase and the renourishment phase, will be an infusion of, in essence, $32 million of sand replacement for our beach, of which the town, I think, is obligated to maybe to pay $1 million of that. So that's $31 million of help from our federal, state, and county partners to really revitalize our beach. Is that an oversimplification?
No, it's perfect, and that's a great wrap-up. Not that I won't take more questions, but I could not have said it better myself.
Thank you.
I would just comment one thing, and this is a little bit off, so I'm putting it at the end. I listened to a presentation by the engineer who rebuilt the bridge to Sanibel through the causeway. There was a question by an engineer who was, and I've known other bridge engineers who say that we should just make the whole thing a bridge and not have the causeway islands. And he implied that the causeway islands were one of the reasons that we always run a deficit in sand in the north part of the island. That they change the flow and block the flow, and are one of the reasons that we have that. I don't know if the town wants to get involved in trying to encourage the county to rebuild that as a bridge, so we don't have this constant recurring problem of losing sand in the North Island.
Well, I think that can be a discussion down the road. That the county, like us, I'm sure, has plenty of things on their plate right now to worry about. Is there any other questions for Mike? Hearing none, thanks, Mike, for
Thank you
taking
all.
your time. I know we probably kept you a little longer than.
You're very welcome. That's
but,
okay. Happy to answer all the questions, and I'll wait outside a little bit in case anybody has any other questions they want to ask of me. I'm happy to stick around a little bit.
All right, thanks, sir.
Thank you all.
Now we'll move back to the consent agenda, items A and B. Is there a motion to approve items A and B? Oh, hold on. Let's hear from John first.
Because they were pulled, you
Individually. Got it. Okay. So consent agenda A, Estero Island Emergency Berm Construction Phase Services. Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
I'll second. Got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that carries unanimously. Consent agenda B, Estero Island Beach Nourishment Project. Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
I'll second. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. That motion- Well, if you can still hear, that motion carried unanimously. All right. Do we want to take a few brief breaks so before we start the public hearings? We'll say a 10-minute recess, so we'll get back here at, what is it, 1:10? 1:17. 11:17, sorry. Not a 2-hour recess. All right, everyone. Hey, I don't think this thing's on. All right, everyone. We're going to call the meeting back to order. If I could get you to grab your seats for a second, that'd be great. It's 11:19. We'll call the meeting back to order. Our first public hearing is ordinance 22-13. It's a final reading and second public hearing on proposed ordinance 22-13 entitled an ordinance of the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, establishing a new section 1-13 of the chapter 1 of the Code of Ordinances, Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, authorizing the adoption, amendment, and implementation of fees and fee schedules by resolution unless prohibited by state law or the town charter, providing for codification, conflict of law, scrivener's errors, severability, and providing for an effective date. Who's starting out?
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, council, this is an ordinance coming back to you on second reading. First reading, to refresh your memory, was prior to Hurricane Ian, and it authorizes the council to adopt by resolution a fee schedule for all the fees unless otherwise specified by state law or code that it has to be done by ordinance to facilitate the ability of the town council to adopt that fee schedule without having to go through the two, or in some cases maybe the three public hearing process that applies to ordinances.
All right, thank you, John. Do any of my counselors have questions for other staff or John? Okay, it is a public hearing, so go ahead. Turn your mic on.
I just want to make sure that what this says is, just from me understanding, that if we want to change a fee or propose a new fee or something like that, we don't have to go all the way back through starting over like an ordinance, but it can just be a fee change that was agreed upon, changed, voted on, right?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
John, just to add on to Karen's question, or Councilor Woodson's question, is if this does this require two hearings?
This particular ordinance?
Yeah, in other words,
or the fee schedule changes.
the fee schedule. So, in other words, if somebody proposed a fee schedule change or a change in the fee schedule, would there be a period of time where the public could react to that and come back at the next meeting before the final vote?
Yes, it would be brought back to you, assuming there was direction by the town council. Then town staff would prepare a resolution reflecting the change, addition, or deletion that would then come before you, go on the next agenda for approval, and there would be an opportunity for the public to comment on it in accordance with your normal policies and procedures.
Thank you.
Any other questions? It's public hearing, so we can open it for public comment. Anyone wish to speak on this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll close it, bring it back to the council. Is there a motion to approve ordinance 22-13 fees by resolution? Go ahead.
So moved.
I'll second it. All those in favor signify by saying, oh, roll call. Oh, God. Okay, hold on. Councilor Veach? Councilor Woodson?
Aye.
Mayor Allers? Aye. Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Aye.
Councilor King?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next one is ordinance 22-02 corner lot and setback regulations. It's the first, 23, I'm sorry. It's the first reading of the public hearing of proposed ordinance 23-02 entitled An Ordinance of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 34, Article 3, Division 3, Section 34-638, Minimum Setbacks, Section 34-2, Definitions, and Table 34-3, Dimensional Regulations in Conventional Zoning Districts, providing for severability, codification, scrivener's errors, conflicts of law, and effective date. Open public hearing and scheduled for second reading and final adoption Tuesday, February 21st, 2023 at 9 a.m. Go ahead, Sarah.
Good morning, Sarah Probst with Community Development. Jacob is setting up the presentation, so let's hold on a second so everyone can see it all at once. I will start off sort of explaining this ordinance. Some of it was recommended by council back in June. Then it was at LPA. There have been several discussions at LPA, so some of this was directed by the previous council, and some of it was directed by the LPA. So as we're going through this, you may have questions about where things came from, what they mean. Please feel free to ask. I'll do my best to explain it. Some of them sort of require visuals, unfortunately, it seems. But this morning, we're going to be covering several topics in this ordinance that are related to setbacks. The ordinance language in your packet covers corner lots. Oh, perfect. I don't know that I'll know how to change this. Covers corner lots, porch and stoop encroachment, decreases in additional setbacks for houses over 65 length based on the side street setback, removal of the 15% side setback requirement, amending the Matanzas 10-foot side setback, and allowing for new mechanical equipment to encroach. The corner lot approach that was agreed upon in June by council is for a standard front street setback of 25 feet and a decreased side street setback based on the lot width and a side setback and a rear setback. So it's still going to have the two street setbacks, but one of the street setbacks will be decreased based on the width of the lot. A property located on Estero would be required to apply the front street setback to Estero so that there would be a continuous setback for all homes along that street, and then the side street would have the lesser setback. There are also provisions that if the lot takes its road access from the narrower side street setback, the site plan must show how that vehicle will not encroach into the right-of-way. So at the LPA hearing, staff proposed a decreased side setback for lots 75 feet or less wide. That proposed language had a setback of 20 feet for lots that were greater than 60 feet up to 75 feet wide, a setback of 15 feet for lots greater than 50 feet up to 60 feet wide, and a setback of 10 feet for lots 50 feet wide or less. The LPA proposed a modification to that concept, with lots greater than 75 feet having a 20-foot setback. So every corner lot would have a 25-foot setback and at least a 20-foot setback. Then lots from greater than 50 feet up to 75 feet wide would have a 15-foot setback, and lots 50 feet or less would have a 10-foot setback. So there are sort of two options in front of you regarding how you would want this to work numbers-wise. In order to allow porches and stoops and to ensure that house massing is commensurate with these decreased side setbacks, those sections of the ordinance have also been amended. The proposed language would allow porches, balconies, and stoops to encroach half of the side street setback or 10 feet, whichever is less. The additional step back for houses that exceed 65 feet of frontage on a street has been decreased in proportion to the side street setback. For lots 50 feet or less, that additional setback would only be 3 feet. For lots greater than 50 feet up to 85 feet wide, the additional setback would be 6 feet. And for lots wider than 85 feet, the full 12-foot additional setback would apply. This ordinance also includes an amendment to return to the 7.5-foot and the 10-foot side yard setback. Staff language had proposed 7.5-foot side yard setback for lots up to 75 feet wide, and increase in the side yard setback to 10 feet for lots greater than 75 feet wide. The LPA had asked staff to look back at the previous adopted ordinance and mirror those requirements, but that previous ordinance, 2019, called for a 10-foot setback to apply to lots 70 feet wide or greater. So you would have you have that option. Do you want it to start at 75 feet wide or greater than 75 feet, or do you want it to start at 70 feet for the 10-foot setback?
Okay, am I live? Okay, there we are. Before you move on with this, Now, when we originally went with the percentage, and this is an idea that you proposed based on a problem, and the problem was that we were seeing people who were combining lots, and when they combine the lots and build across them, basically they get more buildable space because they don't, the setbacks, the inner setbacks between the lots they're combining are now no longer there. And the percentage is a way just for very, very large houses. It was put into place for very, very large houses so they're not giant things right next to other people's houses. I heard some people were kind of claiming that this change, the percentage, was affecting smaller lots, which I don't think is true. It's only larger lots. But for my feeling, I think we could look at tweaking the minimums in that percentage to consider making that work instead of just saying 10 feet is a maximum setback you're ever going to have.
I heard a variety of things regarding who was impacted. I did hear that smaller lots were impacted, but if you apply the 15% to small lots, 7.5 is actually ends up being less than the 7.5 in many instances. So I would tend to agree that the percentage is more fair based on the size of lot. But I was directed to look at other options, and there was a lot of interest in going back. So that's why this is being presented here today. You certainly do not have to proceed with this, but this was the direction the LPA had requested.
All right, Nick, just for the Enlightenment of Council, I would like to keep that on the table and see if we can find a way to tweak that to make it continue to work in a way that I think is fair.
Okay. The last item to talk about is there were two other items that came up in the LPA discussions. One was regarding the application of the 10-foot side street setback for Matanzas Street and Matanzas Court. This is a note in the setback requirements. Nobody seems to know why this was put in there. It does seem to be not based on the size of the lots within that subdivision area. This language that I've provided to you proposes a deletion of that across the board 10-foot setback for Matanzas Street and Matanzas Court. Also, mechanical equipment for existing homes was brought up as a concern because many existing homes would like to add generators or are required to raise electrical panels above flood elevation. The proposed language would allow existing homes to install new equipment that encroaches up to 3 feet into side and side street setbacks. New homes would be required to meet the side setbacks. So if you're building a new home, figure out how to fit your mechanical equipment in there. But if you have an existing home and you need to raise everything, and we're trying to find ways to make sure that that fits. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Sarah, at that
Yes.
point right there, that 3-foot encroachment, it's safe to say that it would be for just elevated mechanicals, or, I mean, if they choose to put their mechanicals on the lower level again, would that 3-foot encroachment still apply?
Most mechanicals will not be allowed to be at below base flood elevation. This specific request came because people were trying to figure out how to install generators. And also electrical panels having to be raised. They have a required distance. You have to be away from them. I think it's 36 inches. So that's where we came up with the 3 feet. The majority of equipment is going to be required to be raised. But it does not require that you raise it within this code. So if somebody needs to install and they're able to install at-grade equipment, we're not limiting that by saying you have to raise it. If they have an at-grade house, they're able to rebuild at-grade, or not rebuild, but repair at-grade, and they're able to put in the equipment. We're not saying that they can't install that equipment. We're just giving them the ability to encroach into that setback without any reference to whether it's raised or not.
And what was the difference between the staff proposed and the LPA proposed? Why did the staff want that extra 60 to 75 foot side street setback? What was the reasoning in that decision? Yeah,
Is this the one?
Yeah.
It was just based on, they were asking for basically a gradation as the lots got wider. This was just what staff came up with, and then At the last LPA hearing, they said that they would prefer to have no setback greater than 20 feet. So from that side street setback, there would never be a 25-foot requirement, whereas, as you can see with the staff proposed, if it was over 75 feet wide, it would have a 25-foot setback. So this was the way staff proposed it. This was what the LPA recommended. There is no preference. It's just whatever you're most comfortable with.
Go ahead.
Just in the interest of time, just so we can have a discussion point, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Town Attorney, help me with this because I'm a bit confused of how this is drafted on the agenda. But I would like to move the adoption of Ordinance 23-02, corner lot and setback regulations as recommended by the LPA. In other words, their language. How would I phrase that motion, John?
That would be the appropriate motion, but I think you need to provide public comment first.
I think that would be a wise choice.
But don't run off yet, Sarah. You might have more. Anybody have questions for Sarah? Sorry to stop you in your tracks. All right, we'll open up for public comment. Anyone like to speak on this? Oh, you have it already?
I have some.
Well,
Carolyn
can we
Caney.
turn the lights back on so we can see what's going on? Thanks.
Good morning, Carolyn Caney. I'm with Woodland Custom Homes. I'll speak on the corner lot setbacks first, and then there are other issues with the other setbacks I'd like to address. I feel that with the corner lot setbacks, we should go with the LPA proposal. I've dealt with a lot of corner lots, and it's very difficult for somebody to get a decent-sized home, you know, when you have 2 street setbacks. Previously, and I'm going back a few years, the setbacks were 15 feet, and then they were changed to 25 feet. So I think the 10-foot on the 50-foot lots is very good, and 15-foot. And I would say 20 feet on a lot that's 75-foot wide is good too. So I am very much in favor of adopting these setbacks. In terms of AC encroachments, it's very difficult on smaller lots to get the ACs anywhere other than the rear, because the way the code stands right now, you're allowed 3 feet into the rear setback encroachment, but quite often you have porches on the rear, which means you have to somehow find a place inside the house to recess these AC units into. And it's also very difficult to get an AC unit on a 3-foot platform, so I think the encroachment, you know, should be allowed, and it, you know, now that it should be a definite 3 feet is doable on an AC. In terms of the other setbacks, the side street setbacks, more so than the front and rear. The side ones, 7.5 feet is already typical with lots that are 50 feet or smaller. As soon as you get over 50 feet, the 15% really does encumber the buildability of the lot. So I agree that all setbacks on the street should be up to 75 feet, and including 75-foot wide lots should be the 7.5, and anything over 75-foot wide, I agree with the 10-foot setback. So I am definitely in favor of adopting the LPA's recommendations that these setbacks be implemented. It is only recently, within the last year, last January in fact, that the setbacks were changed not once, but twice. First to a 10-foot side setback, and then to 15% of the width of the lot. And this really was disfavorable to a lot of people who had already had plans designed. And I don't know why it was adopted in the first place. Nobody was in favor of it, and it caused a lot of financial difficulty for a lot of people. So I'm definitely in favor of going back to having the setbacks as proposed by the LPA. I think that's the right thing to do, and I think that's the fair thing to do for all property owners.
Thank you.
Kara Stewart.
morning, Council. Kara Stewart for the record. I too would like to voice some positive feedback in relationship to the setbacks. A 7.5-foot setback on a 75-foot lot is very standard. It's what the beach had been constructing to. We have now multiple homes that are being planned to be rebuilt, and I'm running into some challenges with some folks with that percentages. So I would like to encourage us to go back to the 7.5-foot lot, 7.5-foot setback on up to and including the 75-foot lot. We must include the 75-foot lots. The 10-foot setback on lots greater than 75 feet seems to work very well with what people are used to. I understand what Mr. Veach is saying, Councilmember Veach is saying in relationship to the combination of the lots, and I believe that there was some change up from the time that it was first addressed as far as the percentage goes to what ended up happening. It does also, that percentage greatly affects lots that are smaller than 75 feet. Prior to the two code changes, a 50-foot lot could have a 10% side yard setback, which is 5 foot. Your next agenda item is dealing with the small cottages on smaller lots, and you're giving some favorable options there, but back to this ordinance, it would have also been pleasurable and helpful if we did something with the 50-foot lots for rebuild back to a 10% side yard setback. But that being said, if we can go forward with the 7.5 and 10, that would be great. Thank you.
That's all I have signed up.
Is there any? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Dave Lay. I think I've communicated with a few of the council members already. I want to thank you all, first of all, for all the work you've been doing through this project and this rebuild of the town. It's incredible. I've got a cottage home right across the street at Bayview Drive, 1920 Bayview Drive, and I am in part of the group that's planning to elevate our home. It's an old cottage home. It's a trapezoidal lot, roughly 66 feet square across. The 15% setback requirement would force me to have actually a wider setback than I currently have. And the problem with elevating a home is that you have to create additional space for landings, for steps, for stairwells that don't currently exist in much lower home. My home is currently 6.5 foot off the ground, so I don't need much length as far as landings and stairwells to accommodate that, but I definitely have to have more room. And also, even though I know this is not legal, I have currently a legal non-conforming lower level apartment, and I'd like to be able to use some of that space upstairs, so I have to build that up. Obviously, I know I can't use that anymore for that purpose. So all I'm really saying is we really encourage you to consider reverting back to the old plan of the 7.5 foot setback on lots 75 foot and under. And that would be great for my build, because we're intending to stay with the FEMA guidelines as much as possible. So that's our intent. I think that's going to be a lot of people on the island are going to have that same interest as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Do you see anybody else that wanted to speak? Two people back there.
Good morning. Jerry Kemp, 5698 Estero Boulevard. And we have an unusual lot. It's irregular in that one side, which is on Sterling, which is considered a street side, goes down to 60 feet because originally the road cuts in and there was a cul-de-sac there years ago when the road actually ended at Sterling Street. And so we get limited to a strange house in rebuilding in that it narrows down. And then the other problem is because we're a corner lot, we have a street, and then we have a rear, which is to the beach, and then we have a side. In other counties, or in Lee County, as I understand it, maybe in Collier part of it, if you have a corner lot, they give you a street and a street and then a side and a side, which would definitely help our situation of getting the square footage. But we're restricted because we only have one side. We have two streets. We have Sterling on the south, and we have Estero on the north. And then you're saying we have to have, nobody's addressed the rear setback, which I believe is 20 feet. And so instead of that being a side, and calling that a side so that we have two sides, you're calling that a rear, and the setback's 20 feet. So I think we get penalized by being on the corner, and that there's no, in other parts of Lee County, you actually get two sides on a corner, and you get two streets. And if we did two sides at 7.5 and 7.5, it makes a huge difference in the square footage. And I guess I'm asking that somebody talks about how we could look at that differently and make it, conform to other areas where if you have two streets, then you have two sides. Thank you.
Jerry? No, I said thank you.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
Well, good morning. Thank you, everybody, for their time and effort on this. My name is Fred Drovlik. I'm a consultant. I've been in front of you with some variances, some good, some not so good, and some that got denied. But so I wanted to speak in support of the LPA's recommendation. Just for me right now, there are 2 active cases, and this takes care of both of them. Either one that would be actually second reading and hearing next session would be, we're requesting exactly this for the variance, so the variance would not be necessary anymore. And for another one that we're not even going to have to file if this goes through, because it was about a side street, and it takes care of that issue as well. So 2 of my cases, I mean, it's not great for me doing work, but it's much better for all of us because we don't have to have brain damage over variances that are tough to argue and tough to prove that hardship, especially if it's new construction. So in full support of these changes. This is a little bit of the weeds, so, and I won't take long on it, but I want to just mention these things I notice as a consultant in the kind of cases I get asked to either take on or decide to not take on because they're not great variances. One is I have a client now that has a lot that's 75.6 inches wide. Immediately, right away, he would look at this and go, well, now I have 5 more feet than my neighbor. He's, their buildable lot would be, a fair amount of less than a lot that was exactly 75. So maybe just to have some language in there, and most LDCs do somewhere that there's just a round down to the nearest foot or something. So for those little, it's probably not very many, but even if it would be a dozen properties that are 75, just round down to the nearest foot, to allow that to not be a nuisance variance is how I would perceive it coming forward. Somebody asking for a 4-inch, 5-inch variance for a new construction, it's not a good argument for, because you could just reduce the size of the house, but it would just might eliminate a kind of a nuisance request. Because people that have a $3 million lot, they have means and they have, it's worth the effort. So, and I'll deny that variance, but there'll be somebody that'll come forward and do that, and we don't need that kind of time spent. And the other one would be, I haven't thought of an elegant way to solve this, but for those that setback on a side street that goes over 75 feet, it goes from 15 to 20. For those lots that are 76 feet, 77 feet, I mean, they're going to have a smaller buildable area than that 75-foot lot because of that jump of 5 feet. Going to 80 feet would probably take care of the majority of them. I wish I knew the exact number of lots that were in between 75 and 80 feet. But that wasn't supported by anybody. I wrote the LPA and everything, and I understand that goes by the wayside, but that was just something that I thought would be considered for that lot size would be, 80 feet and under and 75 feet might eliminate a lot of variance requests. and that was all. I know it has to be cut off somewhere, so I get that.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else choose to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment, bring it back to the council. Any discussion? Is there a motion to, I think you were kind of getting to it, Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would move that we adopt ordinance 23-02 corner lot and setback regulations as proposed and recommended by the LPA. I say that because I have watched all the LPA meetings post-Dean, and they have made a Herculean effort to try to address the various homeowner concerns post-Dean and challenges that folks have faced. They've taken a lot of public testimony. They've sort of found the balance, if you will. They've listened to both sides. They've made compromises. We have an extremely qualified LPA, and I think given these challenging times, at some point we need to yield to their wisdom. And again, they did the give and take. They did the balancing act, and I think they've come up with an excellent recommendation, and that's why I make my motion, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, just for the record, it's approving on first reading and scheduling a second hearing for the next meeting.
You need him to restate his motion? Or do you got it covered with what you
We got
just-
it covered.
Okay. We got a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, discussion? Counselor Veach?
Yep. No, I think that Ted really kind of pointed out one of the problems with the stair-step approach we have is that you can have a bigger lot but a less buildable area. And the more stair steps you make, the more complicated it is, but the less detriment you have to people. So that's why I would be open to something like, say, we have a 10% setback with a minimum of 7.5, which means that in an example of the 75.06 law, whatever it is, they'd barely be affected instead of having that stair-step approach. I think there's some elegance to that. And I am concerned because I'm hearing a lot of anecdotal evidence that there are investors who are buying multiple lots trying to get them together. And I think that if we leave the door open for some giant lots with small setbacks, we will see them, and then the people who live next to them are going to be coming to us with a complaint. The other thing about the stair step is we also heard from someone else during an early public comment, they had a deck that was 6 inches too far. So every time you do that stair step, it's like with the BFE. If you are 6 inches below the base flood elevation, as far as FEMA is concerned, you're back in the 50% rule. They don't give you, it's not like you're now a 90% rule or something. You're a 50% rule. So I think the stair step, although it's easy to put into a table, I think that we can do better with the percentage and eliminate some of these people who would be penalized by just being a little bit too big.
Well, I see your point. And we did have a lot of discussion about this, and I wasn't in favor of the 15% back in the day. So I don't know. This seems to me, as Vice Mayor Adderholt says, there was a lot of information that was discussed at the LPA. They worked very hard on it, and I think they came to a very good conclusion. The only drawback I can see potentially, and maybe Sarah, you can help me out with this, is the 3-foot encroachment on the side. The only fear I see is if I build my house and I encroach that 3 feet with my air conditioning units out the side, and the house next door happens to be their master bedroom, or I didn't get to see the entire LPA meeting, but was that discussed at all, or was that a concern raised by anyone?
It wasn't raised as much because this is for existing houses only. So this is an instance where people don't have much of an option of where to put this additional equipment. The original intent was for generators because typically they aren't already attached to the houses. They've realized after the storm that a generator would be a wise thing to have, and there's just no place to put it. For new houses, they would be required to meet it. There was a discussion about noise, but the noise is an issue that we've looked at previously, and essentially the building official did not feel comfortable supporting any requirements for sound deadening, and for good reason. There's not very good solid evidence on what works and what doesn't work. Generators are only going to be run in emergency situations typically, and a lot of ACs now are quieter than they used to be. So while it was a concern that was brought up, it wasn't top of the list after people went through Ian and sort of, saw how you get through after a storm when there is no power without a generator. So it was part of the discussion, but at the end of the day, they decided that 3 feet was adequate and that they could sort of live with that.
Okay.
So not perfect, but
Nothing seems to ever be perfect, does it?
exactly.
Counselor Woodson, you have any questions, any discussion?
The only discussion that, and I've gone back and forth in this, I was on the LPA when these went through, and we originally had for the lot 75 feet and below, we had the 7.5 and the 10. And then it got changed somewhere along the line. So I have been in favor of this all the way through. I think right now with all the building that we have and getting construction people on the island, getting them to work with us, the simpler the better, the more streamlined the better, and still be in accordance with what the LPA has suggested again.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Adderholt? Any further discussion?
I have nothing additional. Thank you.
Counselor King?
I'm good.
All right, roll call. Vice Mayor, or Counselor Veach?
I'm going to vote nay just because of the percentage.
Counselor Woodson?
Aye.
Mayor Allers, aye. Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Aye.
Counselor King?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1 with Counselor Veach dissenting. Takes us to our next one. Ordinance 23-03, non-conforming lots, minimum use determinations, and
Excuse me,
administrative variances.
Just to interrupt real quick, did you
Oh.
set a date certain?
Oh, date,
Date
yeah.
and time certain?
Let's go. So next, it'll be Tuesday, February 21st, 2023 at 9 a.m. for the second reading.
Okay, thank you.
Now we'll move on to 23-03, non-conforming lots, minimum use determinations, and administrative variances. This is the first reading and public hearing of proposed ordinance 23-03 entitled, "An Ordinance of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 34, Article 5, Division 4, Sections 34-3273, General Requirements for Residential Use on Non-Conforming Lots, Section 34-3274, Minimum Use Determinations, and Chapter 34, Article 2, Division 6, Section 34-268, Administrative Setback Variances, providing for severability, codification, scrivener's errors, conflicts of law, and effective date. Open first public hearing and scheduled for second reading and final adoption Tuesday, February 21st, 2023 at 9 a.m. Sarah?
Good morning, Sarah Probst with Community Development. There are 2 sections of the code that currently make what I'm going to call the small cottage lots undevelopable. The cottage lots are typically square. There are several at the north end. You heard someone ask about them earlier. They don't have direct access they have access off of Estero Boulevard, but not direct access. They don't meet the minimum use requirements, and they don't meet the non-conforming lot requirements because they're too small. So originally, LPA had asked me to look at Section 34-3273 and 34-3274 for minimum use determinations and non-conforming lots. There are a few very simple amendments to those code sections that will make these very small non-conforming lots developable. Currently, the code won't allow you to develop a lot that's less than 40 feet by 75 feet. These cottage lots are all in the 55 to 60 foot square range. The proposed amendment to resolve this is just one to Section 34-3273, and that is to change the specific measurements of 40 feet by 75 feet to receives an affirmative minimum use determination per Section 3274, or 34-3274. Then moving on to minimum use determinations 3273, Nope. Yeah, my apologies, wrong number there. Currently, the code doesn't allow these cottage lots to be developed because they don't have access. So right now, they all have a shared access easement that cuts through the lots. It appears to be 10 to 12 feet. Some of them are improved, some of them are not very improved. We're changing that from direct access to an approved access easement. So when these lots are planned, they need to include that easement showing how all of these lots will be accessed, you know, for the lots that are right up on the road and all of the ones that are further in the back too. This will allow the very small lots to be buildable. However, this does not allow the lots to be buildable without a variance. So then that took me to the next section, administrative variances. So currently this is a very ambiguous section of code. It is not very clear what's intended by it, so we're putting a little bit of clarity in here. Currently, it talks about certain non-conforming lots, but it doesn't really specify which. And it says when a variance is appropriate, but doesn't tell us how to determine that it's appropriate. And it doesn't tell us how much of a setback variance can be provided. So that's what we're trying to provide in this section. What we're looking at here is providing opportunities in very narrow circumstances where staff can feel comfortable passing or allowing something administratively without coming before you. So the language in this code section is very narrow on purpose, and it's so that staff isn't put in an uncomfortable position to pass something that the council may not agree with. So the way we put this together after the LPA recommendations is they can, after they receive the affirmative minimum use determination, the variance would only be allowed, the administrative variance would only be allowed for the footprint of the previous approved and constructed home. It would be a single story above flood with no enclosures below. That there would be a minimum setback of 5 feet allowed. So no house would be able to be 2 feet from the property line or right on a property line. And the lot layout would have to show how this approved easement would be provided. So when somebody is coming in to submit, they would have to show that access easement, and it would have to be approved by fire and emergency services. It couldn't be less than 5 feet on any side, and it would have to be no larger than the footprint of the current home and only 1 story above flood.
Before you move on from that, so what is your understanding of the width that would be required by emergency services to be able to serve these?
We would have to talk with them further. Currently, they're not very involved with residential permits, so this would have to be part of a discussion. I would assume that it would be something along the lines of what they would approve for a small roadway or a parking lot entrance, because that's a public area also.
So that's typically, what, 20 feet, maybe?
And it may be less than that. I really couldn't speak to it. We haven't had the conversations with fire yet.
Sarah, I hate to single anybody out, but Mr. Kemp testified earlier. He has a very unique situation with his lot. The gentleman in the red shirt back there. Did you hear what he said? And would anything that we're doing today help him in his unique situation?
So, if it is determined that it's a non-conforming lot, first, that's the first step. Is this a non-conforming lot? So if it doesn't meet the size requirements that are listed in the code, and then if it can receive a minimum use determination, then it could move on to the administrative variance option. The administrative variance would only provide assistance if you wanted to build what you had and only 1 story above flood and with nothing enclosed below. So it's a very specific instance. Most instances where there is some flexibility, people are going to choose to go through the variance process. If they're asking for more square footage, and we recognize that a lot of people will want to have more square footage. We just want to allow people to be able to build back if they have a small cottage, if they have something really small, and that's what they wanted, to give staff the opportunity to approve them so they're not held up with variances.
I appreciate that. After we're finished here, would you mind just Graham and Jerry and to chat briefly with him, give him a little guidance as to how he might best proceed given his unique situation? That'd be great. Thank you.
Jimmy, what is the reasoning behind just one story above? What was the reasoning behind that?
The vast majority of those cottage lots are a one-story. They're fairly small. If you look at them, they're 600 to 1,200 square feet on these very small lots. We wanted to allow people to build back what they had and not to put staff in a situation where there's too much ambiguity. If it's something that council should really be approving, if it's going to be going higher, if it's going to have a bigger impact on its neighbors, especially with those very small setbacks. If you only have a 5-foot setback and you're building up 2 stories, you are blocking somebody's view. So that might need to be something that goes before council.
Okay.
So anything on that second story then, if they're doing, that has to go through a variance process. Not to say that they couldn't do it, but it won't be administratively given. It would have to go through LPA and council.
Based on the current proposed language, yes.
Did you ever consider maybe a way of just having some flexibility, is that if people were in the situation and they wanted to put that extra floor on, then maybe they could do that with additional setbacks? Because I understand that cottages 10 feet away from each other on the ground floor is one thing. Cottages 2 floors above flood is an entirely different book.
And with this, we looked at the opportunities to have some flexibility. We talked about that at the LPA, and at the end of the conversation, they thought that really people building back exactly what they had was the appropriate way to allow administrative variances. And again, a lot of this has to do with making sure that staff isn't put in a position where they're approving something that may be problematic, and they're allowed to approve without council looking at.
Is that it? Any other questions for Sarah? I'll entertain a motion to either approve or deny. Oh, public comment. God, darn it. Public comment. Would anybody care to speak on ordinance 23-03? Yes, sir. Speak into your mic. I think it's off, I think.
Okay. One thing that doesn't really get discussed a lot is the cost per square foot. You take somebody that just lost their house, and this doesn't apply to me, so I'm just, for whatever it's worth, and you tell them you got to go up 17 feet. There's a lot of cost in that. And for that, you're going to get 1,500 square feet versus 3,000 square feet if you can go one more floor. And I would just hope that you guys would consider just the magnitude of the cost of getting these houses up. We're not a super rich community. And if you want people to stay, you got to give them some kind of option so that they can stay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else choose to speak? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, Council, again, for the record, Richard Durling with Marvin Homes. Our client, as I discussed previously, is one of these non-conforming lots, and our proposal was to rebuild in that footprint of 26, roughly 26 by 26, which did give us a larger setback than a 5-foot minimum. And that's kind of the goal here, is that we feel that if we can go up the extra floor, then we can maintain that smaller footprint and give you some additional setbacks to the neighbors. The other thing is that, as Dan Dodrell pointed out, directly across the street on Estero is a building that's over the single floor. It's 2 floors over parking. Right next door is a high-rise condominium. So we're not impacting, I don't believe, the views that much. It's just allowing the owners the flexibilities at the investments that they're making to have a little bit more flexibility. That little footprint is just under 700 square feet, and it's really difficult to get sufficient number of rooms and bathrooms to the current code in that little teeny footprint. A lot of these structures years ago were modified, some without permits. They shoved a lot of things into those little houses over the years. You know, we're trying not to do that. We're trying to conform with the current code, get these houses up to the proper elevation, to the proper building codes, which shows recently that, you know, they perform really well when they're built to that standard. Also, additionally, I think, you know, it's going to be, if you give direction to the staff to allow this little bit of additional footage and a second floor, then it does alleviate us from having to go through this whole variance process in order to do that. So again, we'd appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.
For the record, Dan Dodrell, Daniel Wayne Homes. Same situation, 2 lots in the cottages already. I have clients. And my question would be if they can meet the setbacks outlined, why couldn't they be allowed to go that extra story? Not 5-foot setbacks if they meet the 7.5, the side street. One of them's on Estero Boulevard. They meet the Estero Boulevard. It is a small footprint, but it meets all setbacks that any other house or any other lot of that size. Why should they be denied to have that extra floor? So that, you know, and basically it's a footprint that's going to allow about 800 square feet. You can't do much on 800 square feet. If you could do 1,600 square foot, it would make it more feasible, and we get the cost per square foot of the total structure down. It is super expensive. You know, my pile driver charges the same exact amount, whether he comes out for mobilization to drive 200 pilings or 20. And so it really drives the cost of a tiny house up, where if you could, you know, share that on 1,600 square foot, it makes it a big difference. And not getting the old footprint, but being able to meet the 7.5 side, in the case of the width, you know, possibly 10 foot on the side street, 25 on the front, the rear, 2 stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
Back again. Jerry Kemp. The last several people that spoke, I totally agree. I don't quite understand the purpose of this view and the staff being upset or being put upon because they have to make a decision and have empathy for one person and not the other. We should have a pretty easy standard. And if I'm on Estero Boulevard on the beach side and I go I can go 2 different ways. I could be non-conforming and look at what happens. I can be where we are now and come for a variance on the rear setback. But either way, the 2 stories, I can build 2 stories, and who would I really be blocking? I'm allowed to do that if I can work within the setbacks or get a variance. But if I don't get it and it's non-conforming, like these homes that are on the north end, you're saying, oh my God, we're blocking somebody's view. And again, I don't quite understand if we're blocking the view across the street that's almost 3 stories high. I don't think you would, number one, but we're hung up somewhere with this view thing versus what builds back the beach. And there was a cottage up the beach, up around where there were 4 houses in a row, and then one right next to it that was like almost 18 feet in the air. It was a little box. It looked like a watchtower. So I don't know if that's the view that people want to see, is we have these houses sitting 20 feet in the air, 18 to 20 feet in the air, and they're 700 square feet. Or, like in my case, you know, you can't have a second story. You have this thing sitting up in the air, and we're not utilizing the land very well, and we're not making it easy, as I think one other gentleman said, to build back on the beach and make it look right. You know, we're restricting a lot of people that, for example, those 4 houses or 8 houses up on the north end, you know, can be restricted to not a useful house, and per square footage, when you drive the pilings, it's cost prohibitive. So if you can consider those things, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We'll bring it back to the council. You know, I think what we just heard is kind of what I was trying to allude to at the beginning is, you know, those cottages on the north end all kind of look the same already before the storm. And I understand the challenges that I think, Sarah, you were trying to put out there as far as administratively, you know, agreeing to them. But to me, what's the difference if it's one story or two story? Being from a construction background, I completely understand the cost per square foot building and understand that it could, you know, 700 square feet is not a lot. If you can be enticed to go one extra story, my guess is that the homes within that same area on the north end would build probably like they were before. They would all kind of look the same. So administratively, it wouldn't be that challenging for staff. You still obviously could, you know, they're not all going to look exactly the same. They're going to want different colors and make it look kind of beachy, if you will. So for me, I'm really struggling with just the one story versus the two. I think it's important to allow people to build back. We want them to build back. We want them to build back kind of in the beachy vibe, I think. And we also, you know, allow them some flexibility to have a little bit more room than what they had before to keep the people here that were here before the storm. So I think that's an important thing that I would just like to put out there, that I would be in favor of going to the two stories versus the single story on administrative, simply for the fact to try to keep the people that we had before the storm. With that, I'll bring it back. Anyone else have any comments or questions for Sarah or suggestions?
I don't have suggestions. Well, I guess I do have a suggestion because I wholeheartedly agree with our mayor that we're really trying to encourage people to stay and to have their home on Fort Myers Beach. And if it takes 2 stories and an extra 600 or 700 square feet, and they can get through the process easily and get going, let's do it. I mean, I don't see a problem with that. I don't see where the view corridor is going to be diminished because everyone is pretty much going to be doing the same thing. So I would suggest that we administratively go the 2 floors instead of just 1.
You know, and I appreciate, because you know, this is probably one of the more complicated things we're dealing with today, is that the cottages didn't really need stairs. There's a lot of things they didn't need. So actually, when someone says they have 600 square feet, probably the time you put the stair in there, you probably have less. But and the other thing is I really have a concern about is promising these small setbacks when we talk to emergency services that the fire department wants 20 feet, because keep in mind, they need to go through and access the buildings at the back of that easement. They need to get their equipment between these buildings at the back of the easement. Then when we were promising them a small setback, but then the fire department will pretty much could take that away, and so they're even narrower. I appreciate that, you know, you add all these things in, and their 600 square foot house is now quite a bit smaller to the point of being impractical. The only thing I would suggest, though, if you do want to put something in here where someone can go 2 floors, maybe we have a more of a setback, because now they're getting more square footage, and so a little more of a setback would help to offset that.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much more you can give. If you got 600 square feet and you try to take another couple feet, you know, you're defeating the purpose, I think. I mean, these aren't huge lots to begin with. Whether they're 2 stories or they're a single story, the stairs to get to that first story are going to be the same regardless. Am I correct in saying, Sarah, that these, no matter what we decide here today, would still have to go through the fire department as far as right of access and all of that kind of stuff would have to still be gone through on their end, right?
Yeah, we would need to speak with the fire department and make sure that the access was adequate for them and find out what exactly they would need there. I don't think that we would want to do that on an individual lot basis. We would probably need to meet all of the homeowners who are developing in that strip. But so it wouldn't be each time somebody comes in to build a house. It would be, we'd probably need to work up front with those homeowners, you know, all 6 or 8 or 10 of them, and work on that so that everybody agrees and is comfortable with it, and then we can set up where the homes can go from there.
When you say an approved easement, now that would be one of the qualifications of the improvement. I think it's in the text is that the fire department would have to approve. I think it would be really handy to know what the requirements are for the second reading on this.
I can do that.
Anything else, Councilor Reed?
Oh, I'm sure there'll be more.
I'm sure.
I
Vice Mayor
just
Adderholt?
had a couple questions for Sarah. Sarah, I watched the hearing, but that was a long hearing. Do you remember why the LPA did not go 2 stories or did not allow the staff to have that authority?
It was really the interest in building back exactly what was there. It was helping to speed along the process for the people who were interested in putting exactly what they had already received on that lot. I think that was the main thrust of the conversation.
So this, if we adopt what the mayor had just suggested, that it really wouldn't slow it, though, would it?
No. It wouldn't slow down people. They didn't want to give, that was the other side of the conversation. Speed up the people who were requesting the cottages that they already had, and then they didn't want to give too much. They're encouraging people to build back the cottages. That was the conversation.
And Mr. Town Attorney, are we, as I understand the way this is structured, if staff has concerns, they could say no, and then they would have to go through the regular process of asking for a variance, correct? We're just in essence empowering staff where there wouldn't be concerns to allow it to go forward without a variance. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
But they're really not building back what they had because now they have to go up, correct?
Many of the cottages are off the ground already. They're not at grade. And the cottage lots that I'm referring to, the square lots, most of them are already raised some amount, but they're not there. Most of them are destroyed. So they're building back what they would have except a little bit taller.
Right, so then we still get into the price differential. What we talked about is like when you have to go up to what the code is now, you're incurring all this extra expense for just 1 story, where price per square foot, if you went 2 stories, it would make it more feasible for people on a budget, per se.
Theoretically, yes, that's true.
And I think it would be safe to say that you could still build it back to just 1 story if that's the way you choose to do it.
Yes.
But just allowing maybe a little bit more flexibility to those that need a little bit more square footage. Maybe their circumstances have changed since they bought the house back in the 70s, 80s, whenever it was built. So that ability is still there to build back what you had. It's just allowing for costs for people that need to make it financially sound for whatever they need to do. Just gives them a little extra option, I think. Vice Mayor, you got anything else to add?
Thank you.
Councilor King? No. Okay. Well, then I'll make the motion to approve ordinance 23-03 as written, with the exception of adding a 2nd story to be brought back for second hearing on Tuesday, February 21st, 2023 at 9 a.m.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. Roll call. Councilor King?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Aye.
Mayor Allers? Aye. Councilor Woodson?
Aye.
Councilor Veach?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Now we're on to administrative agenda. Item A, contract for Bay Oaks Recreation Center emergency dryout services. To authorize the town manager to execute a First Amendment to the existing contract with Coastal Maintenance and Restoration to include the emergency dryout services for Bay Oaks Recreation Center. Allison?
Try it now.
Okay. There we go.
Good afternoon. Allison Geeson, Director of Cultural Parks and Recreation. This is an amendment for the dry out services that you all had previously approved at the meeting for the Mound House, but for the Bay Oaks Recreation Center when we were under emergency preparedness to be able to have a temporary town hall. So it's an amendment to that first agreement with Coastal Maintenance and Restoration.
For Allison?
I don't want to be premature here, Mr. Town Manager, but this is to restore the Bay Oaks recreational facility to be used as a temporary town hall, or is that what we're doing?
Need your microphone.
Oh. Or I could ask Allison the same question.
This is ratify actions that have already been taken to dry it out, so it didn't really relate to town hall as much as it did just preservation of the building and the interior.
So this isn't the contested contract that...
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
I
This
got
is
you.
not that.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Any other questions for Allison? Not a lot of questions, Allison. It's a work that's already been done, right? As you said, Town Manager, it's just a matter of ratifying
Yes.
it. Okay. All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve or deny the contract for Bay Oaks Recreation Center Emergency Dryout Services.
So moved.
Die again.
Counselor Veach, you moved it. Counselor King,
Second?
got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Next one is the Mound House Historic Preservation Repairs. Accept the sole source proposal from Fine Art Conservation Studios, Inc. in the amount of $119,223.55 for repairs to the historical structures at the Mound House damaged by Hurricane Ian, and authorize the town manager or designee to negotiate the final price and contract terms for the presentation and approval by town council at a subsequent meeting. Allison?
So I can only speak for the sole source. I'll need John's help in the other part of the motion there. But this is, this company is International Fine Arts Conservation Studios, Inc. And they were the ones who were sole sourced and approved by FEMA during Irma for the Mound House, as well as we've used them 2 other times for the restoration of Newton Beach Cottage, as well as Mound House preservation repairs. As you all know, that the Mound House is on the National Register, and it's really extremely important to maintain the integrity of that historical structure by hiring companies who are very familiar with this type of work. And in the packet, I did include their resume and different awards and things that they have worked on. So this is a company that I have used, I think, this will be the 5th time, if approved, for this type of work.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Any questions for Allison? Any questions for the town manager? So this would be to, just to make sure that we're clear, this would be to authorize a town manager to negotiate the final price and contract terms that you will then bring back before us at another date, correct? Yes. Okay. I'll entertain a motion for the Mound House Historic Preservation Repairs.
So moved.
Got a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Administrative Agenda C, RFP-23-07-AD, Disaster Recovery and Mitigation Consulting Services. Motion to approve an agreement between the Town of Fort Myers Beach and Tidal Basin Government Consulting, LLC, the top-ranked respondent, to RFP 23-07-AD, Disaster Recovery and Mitigation Consulting Services for incidents and events, and authorize the town manager to execute and expand budget funds on behalf of the town. Any questions for the town manager? None? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Got a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving RFP-23-07-AD, Disaster Recovery and Mitigation Consulting Services, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Next, we have final public comment. Yes, sir, Mr. Perry.
Just for the record, it's Bill Perry. I have a question mostly for the town's attorney. About the easement, I've had a lot of questions from a lot of property owners up and down the island. It's pretty straightforward. The easement in the renourishment areas, the public use is from the erosion control line or where their beach ends now out towards the Gulf where their new beach will be. The question I have is more about the FEMA berm. That's going to be placed up close to the properties, to the homes, eventually where they're going to be built if there's no home, their pool areas. There's the problem. My question is, if the FEMA berm sand is up close to where the house is going to be, is that now considered public land and public use?
You just hold on to that, and we'll have him answer that under town attorney items if you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we proceed out of order in order for the town attorney to answer this very germane question.
Okay.
Yeah,
This time. Yep.
and I'll just put one more thing in there. Where there's a seawall, it's not a problem really. Put the berm up to the seawall. They already know their property ends at the wall. And it's always been customary where there's walls out in front of the wall in the middle of the island. Okay, we'll just, for example, point south. That area in the outer beach is considered be used by the public. So putting the berm there really doesn't change anything for those upland property owners. But where you have the house where there's no wall, and I'm thinking of, where a lot of the residential areas of the island. That's my question, because I'm constantly being asked about the impact of signing the easement, and I want to be able to give a really honest, straightforward answer. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I don't mean to sound repetitive, but I am, because it's the best and most complete answer that I have for this council and for the members of the public. The easement document governs the relationship between the parties. So whatever area is encompassed within the easement, from the dry sand down to the wet sand, is that area, assuming what the speaker said is true, is the area that's covered by the easement. How far up it goes, and how close it gets to the physical property, the home, seawall, whatever it is that might be behind a particular home, I really can't answer, because I think it depends upon obviously each home, the specifics, as well as where that berm is intended to be placed. So it'd be from where that berm is intended to be placed down to the area that is ultimately also going to be renourished with the state funds that were previously discussed. Is that, I hope that answers.
It does, John. I think just since Bill's here, the nuance to that, of course, is that this is not at the discretion of the town. This is based upon a U.S. Supreme Court decision.
It is, and it's also a function of how close to some degree, how wide the beach is in that particular location, where that beach berm is actually going to be located, and it would be impossible for me. I'm not the engineer of record. The plans are on our website, to be able to specify that this is where, I can't say that here, where the easement is going to go. That's a function of the engineers.
Where the berm is, yeah.
Correct.
Yep.
So, but, from that point, downward to the beach, as well as the resulting beach renourishment, as you stated, is a function of the case law and the easement document itself.
John, maybe.
There have been a number, after the meeting, during one of the breaks, a number of residents approached, some of you individually and then me as well. And I'll say again what I think I said publicly as well as privately to those property owners. The decision of each individual property owner to execute that beach berm easement and that renourishment easement is an individualized decision. And certainly the idea or the concept is that by renourishing the beach, by reestablishing the beach berm and ultimately the dune system, that those properties that where that occurs are going to be benefited and protected. God forbid we have another Hurricane Ian in the future.
John, maybe it would help too if you helped sort of define what public access and public use is. You just said earlier that somebody can't have a party there.
Yeah.
But what does that mean from a practical standpoint to homeowners?
Yeah, there's again case law guides us on what is the customary use. Beach is used for enjoyment, recreation, sunning, not having parties, not having certain activities. Although I do know that the further you get away from the uplands, the town does issue special event permits for weddings and small activities of that nature. But otherwise, we have a number of regulations within our code that are designed to limit and restrict otherwise the use of the general public of the beach, as well as certainly the dune area. Once the dune area is established, as was previously stated, there's going, those, not only do we have regulations, but the state has regulations that are designed to protect that area, so it serves the purpose in which it's intended, which is to help stabilize the beach and serve as a buffer from future storm events for the uplands.
Does that help? Yeah. Okay.
All right.
But also, and since we're on this topic, and I realize we're not in the attorney items yet.
Yeah, hold on just a second. Let's see if there's anybody else that wants to. Okay. Anybody else that wants to speak in public comment?
Yeah, I had a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Come on up.
My question is regarding the easement, and it seems like we're talking about two different events. We're talking about the emergency berm, and then we're talking about the beach renourishment. Are both of those easements 15 years with all the kind of the bells and whistles of kind of potential pitfalls that, can you opt for one without opting for the other? Do you have to give up 15 years in order to get the emergency berm?
I guess theoretically, one could do one without the other, and they are separate. There are some, for example, the beach renourishment project. I take that back. Both are intended to also give access to the contractors. The impacts of the beach renourishment project are going to be ongoing longer than probably the beach berm. But to answer your question, it is theoretical that you could execute one and not the other.
The engineer told me you couldn't do that, but
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
well,
from a practical standpoint.
From a practical standpoint, a theoretical standpoint, yes, but to the point, why would you want to do that? Again, that's each individual property owner's decision.
Yeah, this is just a kind of a concern that I have. I'm in favor of building the berm. I think it makes the island more weatherproof. I think it protects us against future storms. My concern is that I have a piece of property that's right by a public access. And what you were saying before about people would have then rights to cut across my property. And if they do that and that becomes common enough, theoretically, that would cease to be my property and would become public lands.
No, it doesn't cease to become your property.
Well,
it becomes subordinate, or it becomes subject to the public use doctrine. And I also would say that from a practical standpoint, the area in question is going to be seaward of the dune. I mean, that's, there's no reason for anyone to be cutting through the dune. In fact, the dunes are protected and you aren't supposed to be cutting through them. So to the extent that the dune is closer to your, any particular property owner's property line or their home or whatever, that's intended to be the natural barrier from people cutting across the back of your property.
So just to restate, you have to sign the 15-year easement if you want to participate in either of these.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And again, that's not the town, that's as a
Right.
condition of us being eligible for that state and federal funding, that's the process.
Understood. Anyone else choose to speak under public comment? Hearing none, we'll close it. Bill, just save yours for your council items, if you don't mind.
I don't want to walk all the way around to the microphone up there to make my comment.
The town manager items.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple items. First off, the volunteer project this weekend, getting the sand off the sidewalks. So I drove back in town yesterday afternoon. It was inspirational. They did a wonderful job there. And then I rode my bike on it this morning too. So it saved me from several vehicles, and I really appreciated it. Also today, as you know, or maybe not, the legislature is meeting in special session to talk about hurricane relief funds. They gavelled in at noon, and we'll see how that turns out. On the table, it was proposed of $50 million for Hurricane Ian and the hurricane that hit, I can't think of the name of it, that hit Daytona Beach. $50 million for relief there to local governments. So more about that when we know more about that. Also, I think I'd spoken to most of you about a builders user group that we have convened, and we held our first meeting Saturday before last. We'll hold another one this Saturday, and we had 3 builders present and several staff members present, and it went very well. I think everybody was on the same page so far. I think we have pretty much unanimous agreement on several topics that of things we can do to help the process out. So
Mr. Town Manager, I think
Yes.
you're a little granular there. Could you explain?
sorry.
No, I think it's a wonderful thing what you're doing, but I'm not sure the public understands exactly what the purpose is of this group. Would you just kind of restate it again to explain? Because I think it's a great concept.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yes, with the numbers of permits coming in, the bottlenecks that we've experienced in the past, hopefully that's lessening. But we were having issues and complaints on our permitting system, and I thought it was best to let's go ahead and convene a work group that consisted of several builders, different types of builders, different perspectives, and our staff in order to look at how our system works for them and how they can experience it and what can they suggest that are their bottlenecks and their problems, just to get a good two-way street of communication going in. We can improve our system and hopefully improve their knowledge also of how to work within our system. And so we met on that, and there's no definitive time frame on it. I thought an hour on a Saturday morning for several sessions would get us well down the road, and I think right now we're already on our way to some very good recommendations to make on how to improve our system and how to improve the interactions between the building community and our system. Does that help? Okay, thanks. So I'm very appreciative to staff for taking an hour out of their, well, they're still working on Saturdays there in building permits, but that's just 1 hour that they're not working on permits and actually working with me. So I appreciate that very much. And also I appreciate the builders and representatives that met with us to take an hour out of their Saturday also to come and do that. And everybody wants to come back. So I think that is a good sign. Also, Lee County is opening. They've announced openings for Lynn Hall on April 15th, Crescent Beach and Bowditch Parks on May 15th. I don't know if you'd received that or not, but I think that seems a little far out still, but that's good news. And they've also the county's also started working on sidewalk cleaning and street sweeping on the south end of Estero Boulevard, and we'll be working their way north so that hopefully we'll at least get Estero cleaned out and more pedestrian friendly here in the very near future. And that's my comments. Any questions?
All right. Thank you, sir. Town manager items. Town attorney. Thanks. I don't know what I'd do without you, John.
Just two items. Requesting the authorization to schedule shade meetings to discuss the pending litigation in Prasad Properties Florida Investments LLC versus the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, and Roger Hernstad, case numbers 2221 CV 384 JLB NPM, pending before the United States District Court, Middle District of Florida, Fort Myers Division, and Prasad Properties Florida Investments LLC versus Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, case number 217 CA 000219, pending before the Circuit Court of the 20th Judicial Circuit and in Fort Lee County. Probably in anticipation of these questions, the first one involves the dispute with regard to the sale of alcoholic beverages at the Sunset Grill, and the second one involves the two homes constructed on the lot adjacent to where Junkanoo Restaurant previously existed.
And do we need
I need the council's authorization to go ahead and schedule those and coordinate with the clerk and with outside counsel for the scheduling of those two shade meetings.
I will make a motion to authorize the town attorney to work to schedule those meetings.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously.
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Council member items and report. We'll start with you, John King.
I'm going to need some clarity around the issue that Bill brought up because my understanding was in talking that the berm can be placed wherever the landowner wants it versus now I'm hearing it has to be decided by an engineer.
I do believe that there's an engineering component to it to determining where it gets located for purposes of the actual construction work. I mean, I don't. I don't know how. Otherwise, DEP won't give us the required permit. I'm making an educated guess, but I'll defer to the subject matter expert, town manager.
That's correct. There is an engineering component to it to provide the 5-year protection, and so that gets into the elevation and the distance. So there is a lot of property owner discretion, but if they wanted to build it right on the water line, no, so you don't have that much latitude with it. But certainly there is latitude with placement relative to the pool, to their house, that sort of thing. But it needs to generally line up along the beach. Not exact, it can undulate, but it needs to generally align itself down the island.
All right, thanks. The second part, I guess, was now I'm just hearing that if you just want the FEMA berm, there are areas that have chosen not to take part in the beach renourishment, but could use the sand to prevent the ponding issues. And I'm hearing you can't do one without the other now. I thought that's what I heard you say.
Yeah, if there are areas that have opted out
Of the beach
of the
renourishment.
beach renourishment project, and those areas experience that ponding because there's been, not just because of Hurricane Ian, but
Right.
Historically scouring, and there's dips and I can't remember exactly what the term the engineer used. If if they've opted out, no, that area is not going to be, nothing's going to be done in that area. Except for I take the beach renourishment up to the mean high water line.
Okay.
Vice Mayor Adderholt.
Nothing additional. Thank you.
Councilor King, or Woodson.
Always have things. So in general, I haven't heard any updates on FPL and lighting. Where are we with that?
That's FPL.
FPL and
Street
lighting
lighting.
and what our next steps are after the proposal, and then they were going to go back and sharpen pencils, and we're doing all kinds of things back and forth, but I don't know where we're at this point.
They're still sharpening. We have a meeting with them on Friday to discuss what they're coming back with now. They obviously are very aware of my personal angst against it, as well as Chris Holly's and town managers. So we'll see what they have on Friday, so that we don't necessarily have a update that I can give you yet.
And then, so I really love the fact that you're having these meetings with the builders and getting outside input on our permitting, but I'm also hearing that our town codes prevent this and our town code prevents that. And I'm just wondering if there's any appetite to look at our town codes and what have been implemented in the last 5 or 6 years under different authority, and really seeing if there are things that can be streamlined on that are not necessary. I don't know who would do that. I don't know how that's done. But is there appetite to look at that? Because I think no matter what we're trying to do, I always go back to, we can throw as many people as we want, but if the process is bad, or we're looking at not so much bad, but if there's ways to improve the process, this might be a way to get there.
Yep. Certainly there's, Florida Building Code, which is a standard we have to adopt. We are in a coastal environment, so that lays new standards on top of that, or additional standards on top of that. And then what standards has the town implemented in the past that we should reconsider, this council would like to reconsider. And certainly I think it'd be healthy to do an analysis and look at that, so that we can really know, just like with the zoning here a minute ago and the setbacks, this was applied, now we're rescinding it, or maybe we're applying something new. I think that's a healthy exercise to go through to get a good assessment of that.
Now, could that be something as part of the comprehensive plan and the town code revisions we were doing with the last council?
Yes, she shook her head yes.
Sarah Probst with Community Development. Yes, that is the next step. So first, the idea is that we get the comprehensive plan laid out. We figure out exactly what that bigger vision looks like, and then go back to the code and figure out what we need to do in the code to make that happen. So that is the next step.
So is there a timing or a general what's next and how soon, or how does that work?
Right now we're in the comprehensive plan portion, and I have a meeting with Corradino this week, so we're going to figure out what changes need to be next month. I think that's the goal.
Lastly, there's still an issue, and I heard it loud and clear this weekend, about food trucks that may or may not be operating without a permit. They were not a restaurant that had a location on the beach to begin with. And now all of a sudden the food trucks are pulling into condominium parking lots. And I actually asked the owner of the food truck if he was able to get a permit for this. And he said, well, no, not yet. But I said, but yet you're here. So I'm just wondering what, do we need to make it loud and clear about what our process is on that, or where do we, because the other restaurants and businesses were pretty up in arms this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we make our policies clear. I don't know about loud, but clear certainly. And I'll look into that one and see. I don't know the answer to that right now, but I'll look into it and see. I don't believe there's any special stipulations for food trucks to be on private property, like in a residential parking lot or condo parking lot at this point, but I'll get back with you on that one.
Anything else?
Good, thank you.
All right, Councilor Veach.
A couple things. Now, I heard we were, of course, before Ian, charging away with building a new Bay Oaks facility. I understand that there's some deadlines coming up, so I think we need to just have a discussion, decide whether we're going to try to continue with the process, or are we going to wait, let that loan term expire and consider the Bay Oak building somewhere down the road.
Well, I'll start, and then we'll go from there. I was not aware of this, and I don't know if my fellow counselors were, but there's the deadline that you speak of November is not to use the loan. You have to have it constructed by November, which I don't think was ever explained to us. So the chances of getting that built by November, I think we can all agree is not going to happen. So I think we've had discussions with the finance staff as to what we could potentially do. Could we convert that into something else? I don't know that there's been a resolution. I'll let the town manager kind of weigh in.
Yeah, I think with interest rates, how much they've gone up lately, banks aren't really that interested in negotiating, changing terms of a loan if they can get more money out of it.
That's exactly right. We've approached the banks, and can we extend this? No. Can we trade projects in and out of this? No. And it's because of the interest rate. So for construction that we wouldn't have completed by November, we'll have to go back and seek other financing or other ways to consider the project. We are looking at, there was 3 projects in there, I believe, the Bay Oaks, Times Square, and I think some improvements,
Bayside Park.
infrastructure improvements at Bayside Park. And so we are looking and going to start some of those projects because the other 2, they can be implemented more quickly and hopefully completed by November. But so we're seeing what we can do with that money, but certainly I think we'll be giving some of it back.
And that is, when they say encumbered, they mean we have to actually have it constructed and finalized, not just
The term
committed.
was, their term was constructed. I've learned in a past life that that definition of construction is variable, so we'll have to pin that down. But yeah, our goal was to go ahead and have construction completed by November, and that way we won't have to argue about it.
And this you think is an all or nothing, so it's not like we can do whatever construction we can get done by November and then deal with the remainder in a different loan or something?
It's just those 2 projects which we could possibly finish by November.
All right. Another thing, back in January, Vice Mayor Adderholt talked about a potential impact fee for new larger buildings or densities. We were going to bring that up at a meeting. Is that scheduled sometime soon on a M&P or?
Just for clarification, the request was a question, and it was a willingness to consider. It wasn't affirming. It wasn't to codify. It wasn't to endorse. It was a willingness to consider. And I thought we would put that on an M&P list or schedule, but I don't know if it's good.
It's on the M&P for the next M&P on Thursday.
Okay, perfect. Okay, another thing I was just noticing, in the situation we have now, we have our public comment and then we have our committees. Can we just change our agenda so that we can add these agencies who come and have them as part of the committee section, so we can actually have a dialogue with them, as opposed to like today, the SBA person coming and just making a public comment that we're really not supposed to be conversing with?
I mean, if that's the direction of the councils, we'll do that.
We could do that, Councilor Veach, or we could, each individual counselor, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, John, and I didn't do this correctly when Mr. Perry did his comment, but I think each individual counselor could ask for unanimous consent to proceed out of order, and then ask a question at that point if something was really germane to that particular presentation.
You can always do that.
It's another option. It's an easy option that anybody has at their disposal at any time, and I certainly wouldn't object if you would have asked the SBA person a question. Yeah.
I'm just thinking it's maybe more appropriate, because right now we seem to have quite a few of that. It happens fairly regularly. If maybe we can just, have it in our documents so it's not every time we want to have a question we have to.
I do love that idea, but it is 12:59. We started at 9, but yes.
It's just something to consider.
Yeah.
Down the road.
But just know that you have in your arsenal the opportunity to ask for unanimous consent to proceed out of order and ask a question at any time during that process.
Okay. Councilmember Veach, part of the problem is that we don't know which agency and which employee is necessarily going to show up until the meeting.
But I mean, the section in the document is, you know, advisory committees, items, reports, appointments. So,
Absolutely.
okay, that was just a way to try to, you know, make things a little smoother and open. And I know it's one, but I'm still have a couple things here. The other thing is I've heard a lot of anecdotes that there's a lot of people doing work without permits. And I would like to figure out a way to encourage people to come in and get a permit. One thing I was thinking about is like a partial amnesty, because right now when people come in, if they are doing work without a permit and they come in and they get caught, then they have to come and pay double the permit fee. That if we can maybe do a limited amnesty, a period of time saying that maybe they get a discount on that double, maybe it's not just one fee but something less if they come in and get their permit sorted out before a certain date.
Is that an M&P request? Because I think that's an interesting idea.
I will make it an M&P request, but I think probably the sooner the better. If people are out there, you know, who have done work without a permit and realize they haven't, now hopefully our permitting process is digging itself out a little more, so it's more feasible for them to get the permits they need.
Also scheduled on M&P is a discussion on fees, so I think that'd be an appropriate time to bring that up.
Yeah, and I would like to make this as, you know, like a time-sensitive thing, because the idea of an amnesty is it's a certain period of time, so it encourages people to do it over that window. So if there's consensus for that, that'd be something I'd like to talk about. A constituent brought me a little baggie of things that he found in the newly sifted sand out in front of Newton Park. So, and I found a big piece of glass down on Sunday on the beach, so I want to, you know, if anybody's out there still listening, then, you know, wear shoes on the sand. Finally, I was reading in the census, I compared 2020 to 2010, and our town has lost 12.5% of its population over those 10 years. And that was before Ian. So when we're talking about the school and other things, that's a bit of a drain and makes it harder for us to build our student body when we're losing people.
All right.
And that's it.
That's it. Well, for the sake of time, I don't have a lot more I could add to that. So with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I'll second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries. We are adjourned at 1:02.